Yes.
I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. The time is 3:45 in the afternoon. And this is a oversight hearing on the issue of early childhood educator equitable compensation. As part of the fiscal year 2022 Budget Support Act of 2021, that is the act we adopted in 2021 for fiscal year 2022, the council established an early childhood educator equitable compensation task force charged with proposing an employee compensation scale for early childhood development providers, a compensation scale that accounts for employee roles, credentials, and experience. Compensation scale would be offset by local funding that was set aside in the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund. Last year, the task force submitted a report to the mayor and the council that proposed a mechanism of direct payment to educators in fiscal years 2022 and 2023, with amounts totaling $53,920,000 in fiscal year 2022 and $72,889,000 in fiscal year 2023. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education, otherwise known as OSSE, has successfully distributed these funds to all qualified applicants. The task force proposed that beginning in fiscal year 2024, OSSE would shift to distributing funds totaling $73,883,000 to child development facilities rather than directly to the educators. In turn, the facilities that accept the funds would be required to pay their eligible early childhood educators wages that reflect the recommendations of the task force. The purpose of today's public oversight hearing is to not only hear public opinion on the updated compensation scale, but also on how OSSE intends to implement the proposed compensation scale in fiscal year 2024 and beyond. In short, in 2021, we came up with a mechanism of recurring revenues that would fund improved compensation for early childhood educators, the educators themselves. We've now had 2 years of experience. There will be a shift this coming year in how the funds are distributed. And the committee of the whole wants to hear from whoever is interested in this with regard to how this program has been working and how it appears that it will be working. The record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. That is, the record will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. Now, there isn't any legislation associated with today's hearing. And I say that because sometimes I've said that because the council will continue working on a matter, people can submit whenever they want to. The record is just simply that we have to file a record, and that's still the case. So if somebody wishes us to consider their comments and to include them in the record, we will file the record based on whatever we receive by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. We have a new system for registering witnesses and also receiving testimony. And the committee of the whole is the guinea pig as this gets rolled out. The system is called the Hearing Management System, or HMS, and it's available to the public through the Legislative Information Management System, or LIMS, all of which is available on the council's website, which is dccouncil.gov. So let me read this. Testimony should be submitted to the council's hearing management system in advance of the hearing or following the hearing at https://lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. If one is unable to testify at the hearing, written statements are encouraged. Again, through that link, lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Statements for the record should be submitted through the hearing management system or left by voicemail. The voicemail can be calling 202-430-6948, up to 3 minutes of which will be transcribed. And again, the record will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. The committee of the whole is testing this new hearing management system, and we will work all the kinks out, and then all the committees will be using it beginning in the fall. There's several other council members who are here. Let me recognize them in case they have opening statements. Councilmember Nadeau, I believe you were the first to arrive.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to you and the committee staff for pulling together this hearing, and to all the public witnesses who made time to be here today. I'd like to acknowledge the teachers and families with young children are at the core of this discussion. Early childhood educators play a critical role in the lives of children and shouldn't be earning low wages and living near the poverty line. They should be compensated equitably for the value of their work. I believe that all district families should have the resources they need so that their children can reach their full potential. And the council put those words into action when we passed My Homes and Hearts Amendment Act, which among other things doubled the salaries and paid early childhood professionals who are overwhelmingly Black, brown, and immigrant women, like the highly skilled and essential educators they are. Of course, this was just one piece of the Birth to Three initiative, which is a long-term necessary investment in expanding the availability of more high-quality, affordable childcare across the District of Columbia. I commend OSSI for its swift and collaborative leadership in implementing the Pay Equity Fund, which has benefited over 3,000 underpaid early educators. Beginning last fall, more than 90% of the licensed early childhood teachers and teachers' assistants eligible for the program received a pay supplement of up to $14,000, with the amount varying by position type and full-time status. This is evidence that the program is valuable and working. Every last cent in the child care budget is needed to continue addressing challenges, but also building on the wins to ensure that every child has access to high-quality, affordable early learning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am looking forward to today's debate. One, to celebrate the progress that the district has made in paying early childhood educators more As has been mentioned, many of those educators are women, Black and Brown, as well as immigrants, and need to be compensated fairly. I'm also interested in hearing from those testifying around ways we can strengthen the program for the future. I know OSSI has made some proposals around the upcoming pay scale. There are some concerns that have been expressed by advocates as well as educators in the ways that OSSI's plans for next year's compensation deviates from the Early Childhood Educator Task Force. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more around how those decisions were made and getting clear around the consequences of them. At a high level, I'm also really interested in better understanding the impact of these greater investments. Yes, we need to pay educators more, but I also am hoping that OSCE can speak to the ways that they're documenting and tracking improved performance for children and young people that are in these facilities where we are investing in educators. And so with that, I am looking for a robust discussion and I'm happy to get it started here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Feels like we've been together all day. Thank you so much for holding this hearing today on an issue that is not only incredibly important for the residents of the city, but for me personally, as a mother of 2 young girls. I know how critical it is for parents to have good and affordable childcare options. I also acknowledge that entrusting someone for an extended period of time with your children is sometimes a difficult thing to do, but it is something that is made significantly easier when you know that those caring for your child are happy, healthy, competent, qualified. Our early child care educators deserve to be compensated accordingly. So many of our early childhood educators are underpaid, and some of the educators spend their own income on materials for their students. This is in addition to covering their own personal costs to live fulfilling lives here in the District of Columbia and in our region. Back in June of 22, the council incorporated the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force recommendations regarding minimum compensation levels for early educators, and soon after, OSSE began delivering funds directly to eligible child care educators. I want to take this moment to thank both the task force as well as OSSE for that quick and swift implementation of those initial payments, as well as to DC HealthLink, because Councilmember Nadeau mentioned the payments, but another thing that has come out of this is that hundreds and hundreds of childcare workers have now had access to quality healthcare insurance coverage as well as a result of our work. I would be remiss if I did not mention that compensating educators appropriately has a positive ripple effect on the workforce in our economy today, which I think you all know. I look forward to today's discussion and hearing from many of our childhood educators to better inform the council and the Office of the State Superintendent of Education on how we can continue to do our part to ensure that our workers are compensated justly and can continue to thrive while providing an essential service that compromises the backbone of our city. I know that there are probably some questions in terms of the scale and where experience fits in or not. And I just want to encourage folks to pull up the task force report, which is available online, which goes into great depth and detail around some of the issues that were discussed during that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Fruman.
Can you hear me?
Barely, but yes.
Oh, I wonder what's going on here. My camera is not working. Well, I will just say that I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman, that you're holding this hearing. I'm grateful to the work of my colleagues to get this started and make this important progress on compensating critical workers fairly. I'm going to be very interested to hear the testimony today and to hear about the issue that I think a couple of people have referred to already about the role of experience in the levels of compensation. This is an area that is not unique to this this space. OSSI itself has been looking at how to compensate bus drivers, how to compensate early childhood educators. We've seen significant increases in compensation for DCPS teachers, for charter teachers. There's a move to try to increase pay for direct care workers to our seniors. It's really critical that we make sure that our people on the front lines who are serving our citizens and our families are fairly paid. And this is one step in that process. I'm grateful to the council and to OSSI and the task force for getting us here, and want to make sure we do it properly and do it in other places where the needs are also great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm going to call the first group of witnesses. I'm going to call by page. So on page 1, Nikila Smith, who's a member of People for Fairness Coalition. Tazra Mitchell, who is Chief Policy and Strategy Officer with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. LaDon Love, who is Executive Director of Spaces in Action. Sia Barbara Camara, who's Chief Strategy Officer, DC Early Learning Collaborative. Akeem Ma'at, who is Collaboration and Advocacy Director with the DC Early Learning Collaborative. Aura Cruz Heredia, who's Grassroots Policy Organizer with Spaces in Action. Destiny, I think I pronounced that correct. Destiny Bolton, who's a member of Spaces in Action. Latrell Fitchett, who's CEO with Promoting Love and Wisdom Home Child Care Center. Deja Williams, who's Health Equity Organizer with Spaces in Action. Natasha Riddle Romero, who's Bilingual Community Organizer with DC Action. Hope Joyner, who's Membership and Relationships Manager with Spaces in Action. Adam Berrigan Smith, who's Advocacy Manager with Educator DC. Artia Brown, who's a member of Educator DC. And Fari Damina Tumpe, who's Senior Community Builder with Spaces in Action. So you all should be let in. Let's see who all is here. Nikila Smith, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, you're first up. Witnesses have 3 minutes. If you're in gallery view, which I recommend, you will see a clock. If you're lucky, somebody will forget to turn the clock on. Otherwise, please stick to the 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank
Good morning,
you.
Council. Oh, sorry. Good morning, council member, and members of the committee. My name is Nikila Smith. I'm a committee organizer and a co-lead of the Rhonda Whitaker Streets for Life Women's Initiative, People for Fairness. I'm not going to say that I'm embarrassed because I'm coming off the record right now. I'm coming out my, I wrote something, but it doesn't seem like it fits this committee, but it does fit this committee because I am a mother and I'm a wife, but I'm homeless. So it's like I've been homeless for a year. So my argument wouldn't be as fair as everybody else's, but I'm still going to give it a go. Learning is a big part of life. We learn from the time we are born to the day we pass. Education is a must. I can't say I'm active with my school and my kids now. This is an issue with being homeless. I can tell you, I raised my kids, my kings and queens, to set the stakes very high. I am and was willing to do whatever it takes for my children to have the best education. If that meant working at one of the top schools, and I did, in Philadelphia. Aside from all that, my kids have passion for school. I instilled in them I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with this. My passion for education runs deep. I love tutoring, teaching, and learning. As a family, right now, I'm learning to use education no matter how much I have to figure out how to become housed. Again, I'm blessed with things I can do and things I can't do. My willingness to learn keeps me going. I'm learning that if you are not educated about where to go, what to do, and who to talk to, you will be homeless for a long time. Coming to DC, I don't know where to go. I don't know everything about what to do, but I am going to testify any chance I get. And if it doesn't fit, I don't understand, because I'm going to keep speaking about things that need to be changed. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And if you can, please provide us a copy of your statement. The next witness is Tazra Mitchell.
Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Tazra Mitchell, and I'm the Chief Policy and Strategy Officer at DCFPI and an executive committee member of the Under 3 DC Coalition. DCFPI commends OSSI for making bold progress on fair pay for more than 3,000 early educators, most of whom are Black and Brown women. In April, OSSI submitted to Council the parameters for phase 2 of the compensation program. That is, when they will disperse pay equity funds directly to facilities. DCFPI is deeply concerned that OSSI's funding formula deviates from the recommendations of the task force, reducing average pay by up to $6,700 for early educators based on our analysis. DCFPI, however, supports and applauds OSSI's decision to factor anticipated administrative expenses into the formula, offer the equity adjustment only to those in the subsidy program, and updating payments on a quarterly basis. My written testimony offers greater detail, but today I'll focus my comments on the formula. So most of OSSI's parameters for the compensation program are in lockstep with the task force's recommendations. However, the biggest deviation from those and the Birth to 3 law, which underpins the pay equity fund law, is OSSI's decision to peg the base award to minimum required salaries rather than average salaries in the new salary scale. The task force identified average as step 5 on that scale. This is possible because the pay equity fund law that council drafted and approved gives OSSI the discretion to build a formula based on minimums rather than full parity. The result is that OSSI will, on average, only provide facilities enough funding to meet educator salary minimums at the bottom of the scale. That is, the pay intended for those with 0 years of experience in the field. This limits facilities' ability to pay eligible educators based on credentials and experience, which again was the intent of the Birth to 3 Act. A design based on minimum salary shrinks educators' pay on average by between approximately $3,900 to $6,700 in the upcoming fiscal year. For a teacher living in a 2-bedroom unit in Marshall Heights, where I live in Ward 7, that's enough to cover about 5 months of rent. Teacher pay will increase, but it just won't reach full parity across the salary scale. This shortcoming undermines efforts to dismantle the racist legacy of underpaying early educators compared to DCPS teachers. It also reiterates the importance of the council protecting all pay equity funds from raids, its non-lapsing status, and ensuring adequate funding to reward experience in future years. A formula based on averages versus minimums would in fact enable OSSI to redesign the base award to follow the recommendations of the task force and Birth to 3 law. On another note, teachers and TAs are the intended beneficiaries of the salary provisions. DCFPI encourages the council and OSSI to ensure that 100% of the base award goes towards raising salaries, and they can do that through a supplantation prohibition in the PEF contract. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. LaDon Love, who I believe is not here. Sia Barbara Camara.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, other committee members, and staff of the City Council Committee of the Whole. I'm Sia Barbara Kamara, longtime Ward 4 resident, Chief Strategy Officer for the DC Early Learning Collaborative, a member of the Executive Committee of the Under 3 DC Coalition. The mission of DCELC is to work with a wide range of stakeholders to prepare children from birth to school entry for success in school, careers, and in life by improving the quality, quantity, and affordability of high-quality early childhood education services in the District of Columbia. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony during this public oversight hearing on the early childhood educator equitable compensation. We commend OSSI for successful implementation of phase 1 of the pay parity fund. Consistent with the recommendations of the task force, OSSI worked with an intermediary organization, AidKit, to disperse pay supplements directly to early childhood educators in fiscal years 22 and 23. Consistent with recommendations from the council-created task force, OSSI is poised to fully implement the pay parity program effective October 1. And so through a series of informational sessions, they have shared a suggested salary scale consistent with DCPS teachers and includes roles, credentials, and experience, the child development facility payroll funding formula, and a minimum salaries and salary scale for early educators. Unfortunately, OSSI did not provide a funding formula that sets up early learning programs for success in implementing the suggested salary scale, as my later remarks will detail. Implementation of the system, incorporating salaries through organizational payroll systems will begin October 1. However, there are some concerns with the stated implementation. OSSI indicates that programs will receive their first quarterly payments before the end of the first quarter. Program and educators expect to receive funds in October to facilitate salary increases before the end of 2023. Encourage OSSI to expedite system upgrades to facilitate the first quarter payments. Pay parity for early educators includes and experience based on the Birth to Three law and the Pay Equity Fund legislation. OSSI's omission of experience will negatively impact income of educators by an estimated $3,900 to $6,700. And so this undermines the law. So OSSI should review its plans and include experience to ensure true pay parity. OSSI should implement a more vigorous campaign to increase awareness of the educational requirements and resources available to assist individuals in meeting these requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not have a copy of your statement. If you would please provide that.
This has been submitted.
We don't have it. So if you could then resubmit it. Hakeem Ma'at, I believe is not here. Aura Cruz Heredia, I believe is not here. Destiny Bolton, I believe is not here. Latrell Fitchett, I believe is not here. Deja Williams, I believe is not here. Natasha Riddle Romero.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and other attendees. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the ECE Pay Equity Fund. My name is Natasha Riddle Romero, and I am the community organizer for Under 3 DC. I've been working alongside teachers since the task force days of the Pay Equity Fund, and in that time, I have learned a lot about the implementation of the fund and the impact of it on teachers. I have talked to dozens of teachers, home caregivers, and center directors throughout the past year to get a sense of what could have been done differently and what was successful. Let's start with the successes. As with any program that provides direct cash assistance to low-income people, the money was tremendously helpful at a time when many educators were deciding whether their love for children outweighed their need to meet basic economic necessities. Teachers don't want to have to choose between doing something they love and putting food on the table. And for many, the Pay Equity Fund helped them do both. That is invaluable. The fund helped countless others meet credential requirements. Yadira, a teacher at a home-based program in Ward 4, told me she was extremely grateful for the opportunity to learn new ways of thinking about early childhood development. Anna, another teacher at a home-based program, told me learning about children's brain development has changed the way she parents her own children. Esther, who just received her CDA, wants to continue her education, and these funds will make it easier for her to do so. Better educated people is always a good thing. To learn more about these teacher stories, please read their written testimony, which will be submitted to the public record. In each of these teacher stories, there's also evidence of how things could have been done differently to ensure every qualifying teacher got their much deserved funds. Under 3 DC recently held a meeting to ask teachers just what they thought would make the program better, and this is some of what they said. Providers need better technical assistance from OSSI when dealing with eligibility documents on the Division of Early Learning licensing tool, especially if they're non-English speakers. Many teachers that changed jobs or positions were deemed ineligible because their data didn't follow them to their new position. Providers must be instructed to update their DELT information when they hire a new teacher, which requires assistance from the licensing and compliance department at OSSI. This process can take a long time, especially if the licensing The inspectors are not properly trained. And even more time if OSSI doesn't have enough Spanish-speaking licensing staff. Some teachers were concerned about the amount of money they had to pay in taxes because of the lump sum payments. Tax documents were not properly handled by AidKit and caused a lot of confusion. Teachers had to pay hundreds of dollars to amend their taxes and were given little to no assistance to understand how these errors could impact them. Most teachers are concerned with OSSI's ability to handle their data in DELT. Teachers are also concerned about cuts to the program that seem small, like the most recent, but that over time may undermine the success of the program. There's still a lot of work to do to make sure that the Pay Equity Fund continues to work for the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I do have a copy of your statement, so thank you for that. Hope Joyner.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. My name is Hope Joyner, and I'm a child care champion organizer with Spaces in Action. We are a grassroots organization, and we build people power for Black, Latinx, and immigrants in Washington, D.C. And I'm currently here in Blondie's Child Care Learning Center to stand with our educators as they share their stories with you in the committee today. Over the past few months, our team at Spaces in Action has done our part to ensure that the voices of teachers directly impacted by the decisions of this body are heard. More than 150 teachers testified live or in writing before the committee during the OSSI performance and budget oversight hearings. More than 50 teachers joined us for an office visit to meet you where you are in your office. And we visited more than 8 centers during a day without child care action, where only one of the 13 council members joined us to stand with the educators. These teachers have done what you have asked them to do in order to be heard. They've been ready, and they have been taking advantage of every single outlet that you have put in front of them so that they can be heard. Today, I come to you to be very clear that our educators are often impacted by many intersecting issues. These are people who have not only been struggling to earn a fair and dignified pay, but who are also struggling to keep up with DC's rising costs in housing and food. So I speak to you today with that knowledge and that framework from our teachers' mouths directly. Today, I want to uplift some of our stories from educators who are not here today, but have been here in the trenches with us and who will continue to be here after today. I want to start off by acknowledging that the exact time of this hearing, most teachers are caught up during pickup and they are not available to testify. So we come here today to again raise those voices. Many of the educators who originally registered and are not able to be here today, but they are paying attention during the budget fight. They have asked for time over and over again to speak about the Pay Equity Fund. And that's because they understand the power of not being able to share their stories fairly. Last, I just want to make sure that the committee knows that lived experience is something that should be paid for. Lived experiences in childcare centers is something that education simply cannot teach you. Educators often work for passion, not for financial gain, but that's not because they choose to, it's because it's out of force. Please take a look at my testimony that has been submitted for further detail about why the Pay Equity Fund should continue and should be increased. Thank you all for hearing my testimony today.
Thank you, Ms. Joyner. Adam Berrigan-Smith.
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. My name is Adam Berrigan-Smith, and I am Educator DC's Advocacy Manager. I will try to keep my remarks brief today because I know you would like to primarily hear from teachers. Many of our teachers were not able to attend today's roundtable, but plan to provide testimony in writing and via voicemail. So I would like to share some of their thoughts and concerns on their behalf in this forum. Something I heard from every teacher was about the failure of AidKit to provide teachers with correct tax documents for their pay equity pay supplements in a timely manner. Last summer, before OSSI announced AidKit as its partner to administer the Pay Equity Fund, advocates raised the issue about withholding taxes from teachers' pay supplements. Because AidKit is not an HR firm, we were told that AidKit could not withhold taxes for teachers. Instead, teachers were advised to consult tax advisors about their tax liabilities on the pay supplements they received in tax year 2022. In January, AidKit provided teachers who received pay supplements in 2022 with 1099 NEC forms, which are used to report compensation subject to self-employment tax. On April 7th, a week before tax day on April 15th, AidKit sent emails to recipients saying, quote, "We would like to inform you that based on advice from tax professionals, AidKit has corrected the 1099 NEC form you received for participation in the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund. On April 6, 2023, AidKit updated 1099 NEC to show $0 amount, and on April 7th, issued a 1099 MISC with the correct amount you received from the program. We want to make you aware that this correction may have implications for your 2022 tax filing. We strongly encourage you to consult with the tax professional if you have questions or concerns," end quote. Between January, when AidKit sent the first 1099 form, and April, when they sent the correct form, many teachers filed their taxes. Not only did they file, but like many people, they use services like TurboTax and other online tax preparation providers, and had to pay twice to have their taxes filed correctly, due to originally filing with the incorrect 1099. This reduced how much pay equity teachers received and led to a prevailing sense among teachers that they cannot trust OSSI to implement the program in a way that reduces the burden on teachers to receive their well-deserved compensation. Because of this experience, there are concerns about OSSI's implementation of the Pay Equity Fund in fiscal year 24, specifically about the payments OSSI will make to child development facilities to implement the new pay scale. I will conclude my remarks with questions you should keep in mind when engaging OSSI in oversight. Does OSSI plan to update its funding formula in fiscal year 25 to provide funding to child development facilities to implement the salary schedule with step increases to compensate teachers based on their experience, as recommended by the task force? How and when does OSSI plan to provide technical assistance to child development facilities to support them in completing applications? When can child development facilities expect to receive payments from OSSI to implement the new pay scale in fiscal year 24? And when should teachers expect to begin receiving pay equity in fiscal year 24? Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bergen-Smith. Artia Brown?
Yes, that's the Artia Brown. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Artia Brown. I'm a teacher at Educator DC, Parkside, and have been an early educator for the past decade. I became an early educator because I love working with children and helping to shape who they become. I consider it my part in making the world a better, safer place. I'm a fierce advocate for early learning and early intervention. I've seen and experienced the positive effects it has had on my students, families, including my own. The amount of work and energy our early educators put into our classrooms and our children and our professional development is truly inspiring, but severely underfunded and underappreciated. Before this fund, I considered transitioning to another career. There was no incentive for me to pursue my degree or to continue in this field that I love and am very passionate about. This fund gave me hope that things would change for the better, that people were beginning to see the value of early education and how important it is for the trajectory of children's lives. With the Pay Equity Fund, I was not only able to pay off debts, but I was able to begin a savings plan that gave my family some breathing room. Although that was a great means of support, I and many other teachers were blindsided by the impact it had on our finances and taxes. So many were unprepared and unsure of how to proceed and found themselves struggling with that aftermath. I feel that OSSI could have been more prepared and successful in this endeavor by removing taxes before distributing checks, or even setting up financial literacy support so that the fund worked for teachers instead of creating another problem to solve. I'm also a little disappointed to hear about the cutting of funds. Early education has proven to be a positive and effective foundation for students' learning and family support, especially for working parents. I hope moving forward that we continue to advocate and acknowledge the value of early educators in our city, in our country, and globally. And I hope that we will continue to be proactive instead of reactive in implementing this next round to ensure that participating centers are compliant and are able to implement this transition effectively. I hope this is the first conversation of many on how we can continue to support and grow our early educators. In closing, I would like to say thank you for advocating for us and working with early educators to make sure our work, our dedication, and our education are appropriately compensated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I don't have a copy of your statement. If you would submit it, please.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. I don't have questions for any of you, but let me see if my colleagues do. Councilmember Nadeau? We'll
No,
see.
Chairman, no, thank you. I appreciate that, the testimony.
Councilmember Parker, do you have any questions?
I do. Ms. Mitchell, you shared several concerns with how OSSI is proceeding with, or their newly released pay scale. Can you just speak to any engagement the Fiscal Policy Institute has had with OSSI, and what were some of the outcomes of that?
Sure. So we've been, as part of the Under 3 DC Coalition and as part of that coalition's policy team, we've been meeting regularly with Sarah Mead before she went on maternity leave and her respective staff. So we've been talking to them before the task force, during the task force, and most recently during this budget season. I have not had a chance to reach out to, I've only had a chance to talk to one person in OSSI about my concern, given that I just analyzed it over the weekend, given budget is still ongoing. But we've been engaged and been encouraging them to share details about the funding formula. As you know, as a result of the updated WTU contract, the release of the funding formula was delayed from March to, I think, a couple months later. So we didn't have a chance to testify on this at the performance oversight hearing, which is why our coalition pushed for today's hearing to give us more time to analyze what OSSI put forward and to give you all feedback.
Thank you. And then you talk about how some child development centers may be misusing, I'm going to use that word, or supplanting some of the funds where 100% of the base award is not going to teachers, and you are advocating for expanding
Sure, I can see
salaries. What data do you have on that, if any?
So I think you're misreading my testimony. I'm not saying that facilities are supplanting. What I want to make sure is that there isn't any room for them to take any dollar of the base award and put it towards other pay. Over the past couple of years in front of this very body, we've all testified about how facilities are operating on really tight margins. That's due to systemic racism and the undervaluing of Black and Brown labor, particularly care labor. So the profit margins just aren't as large as other businesses. And, you know, like Birth to Three was about raising pay for early educators. The task force talked about, looked at that mission and put forward recommendations. And the pay equity fund law right now is about raising pay for lead teachers and teacher assistants. So I want to make sure that, and just to say, DCFPI supports expanding the pay equity fund to directors and other staff who are really important to the operations of running child facilities. But as it is in the law right now, this fund is for teachers and teacher assistants and lead teachers. And so I want to make sure that the law and these dollars, the law is followed and that these dollars are actually reaching the hands of teachers. I didn't get a chance to talk about it today in my oral testimony, but in my written testimony, I also offer some evaluation measures that OSSI can use to gauge how much of the fund is actually going towards teacher pay. Right now, if a facility meets the minimum pay, but it's getting a larger award, none of that award actually has to go to teacher pay. So I just want to tighten up some of the rules in the pay equity fund contract to make sure that 100% of the base pay actually goes towards teacher pay, particularly given the reasons that I raised regarding the formula not following the advice of the task force. I think that as we evaluate the program and assess whether or not the average salary that OSSI uses in the formula, pulling from that survey, is accurate or not. I think we just need a couple of years of data collection to determine whether or not this is enough money for facilities to get teachers to minimum pay and how much they have left over. I will say that if they use 100% of the base award towards teacher pay, for those who are participating in the subsidy program, there's still funding from the equity adjustment that they can use to further bump up teacher pay or to help address, to really repair that racist harm that I talked about earlier and use those extra dollars as needed. But I'm not saying that facilities will supplant the dollars. I want to make sure that there are protections in there to make sure that as much of the fund goes towards teacher pay as possible.
Understood. Thank you for that. I want to thank everybody on this panel, and it was great to hear your testimony as well, Ms. Kamara. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Henderson, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple. If Ms. Brown is still here, or even Ms. Joyner, because I think you said you were at a center. I appreciate your testimony. I was curious whether or not you all had any feedback on the proposed compensation scale that OSSI has released.
I would say it is definitely a good start. Again, if you are not an early educator, it's hard to kind of see the work that we actually put in, even as just an assistant teacher, how we have to adapt on the go, just the amount of energy that it takes to be a teacher, especially early educator. And I think that, again, this is a conversation that should be continued and considered, but I do think it's a good start, a good starting point.
Okay, Ms. Joyner.
Thank you. So one of the things that we want to ensure that is included in the compensation package is experience, because like I mentioned earlier, book education is fine, but there's just some things that you can't grasp without actually physically working in a child care center. And experience sometimes is just as equal and important, if not more important than education. So we definitely want to make sure that experience is included in that compensation.
Yeah, the original charge for the task force, so the original idea of all of this was that experience would play a role in the scale in a similar fashion that it happens for DCPS, right? So, they have you have a master's degree, but if you have 25 years of experience, you're starting at a different a point. And I want to pull a little bit more in terms of why that wasn't necessarily included and only on credentials and title, as opposed to the experience piece as well. But I appreciate your feedback on that. And thank you all for, well, let me ask a different question. What did the feedback, and anyone who's on this panel can sort of weigh in here, but did you feel like, well, what have been the mechanisms for you all to be able to provide feedback on the scale, to be able to say, hey, I actually think that this type of experience is better, or to even suggest the experience bands should be if you have 10 to 15 years, if you have 15 to 20 years, or 20 or more, or whatever it looks like. Do you feel like you had an opportunity to provide feedback on that?
So I do just want to say as well, in my longer statement, you will see an example of two teachers here at Blondie's, where I'm currently at now, where the mother and daughter experience really played a role in why it should be included into the pay equity. But because we are physically in the centers on a regular basis, we've seen experiences where situations come up with the children, and a book will not tell you how to necessarily handle that medical situation or that urgency, right? Because a book will tell you don't freak out and don't panic, but until you're in that actual environment, you don't know what panicking and freaking out looks like within a childcare center where you have parents coming and going, a room full of 40 children possibly, and you're trying to get them fed and keep them quiet and stay calm. Only experience teaches you how to stay calm in an emergency situation with toddlers and children between the ages of 3 to 5 years old, possibly. That's experience based. Books can't teach you that. So we are in the centers every day. We have not only heard directly from our educators, from our directors, but we have seen it with our own eyes, how important experience plays into running a child care center.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that's where all of our feedback comes from, because we're physically in the centers on a regular basis.
Yeah. Tazra?
Can I add to that? We did not see a draft of the funding formula or any of the proposals, although some of the members of the executive committee of Under 3DC Coalition were in meetings with reps from the Division of Early Learning, and we were given preview to some of the direction that they were going, that they felt like they would likely take. There was no opportunity to see a draft, provide feedback on it, and then for the division to rework it. So that's why, given that report came out after performance oversight, we urged the chairman to hold this hearing so that we could actually offer feedback. But time is of the essence. This is supposed to launch in October. So I'm afraid that given the implementation, the time that it's going to take to implement this phase, I worry about how much time we're actually able to provide feedback for the 24th fiscal year versus later years.
Thank you. Over my time. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to these panel of witnesses.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Fruman, if you have questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. I really want to thank the witnesses for their testimony. It seems very clear that the question is, how do we deal with experience in this setting and whether we can get it done for FY24. Really appreciate the work of the people who have been speaking today, and certainly take to heart that there's some things that a book can't teach you. Books can teach you a lot that's important, but they can't teach you every single thing. And that some of that special magic is so important in every space, but including in this space. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you again to each of the witnesses. Appreciate your testimony. You all are excused, and I'm going to call the next group of witnesses, which is page 2 of the witness list. Trish McFadden, Kira Hernandez, who is listed as an early educator with Blandis Child Learning Center. Blandina Hernandez, who is also an early educator with Blandis Child Learning Center. Sharon Lemons, Victoria Franklin, Kamia Osenying Bima. I apologize if I mispronounced the name. Osenying Bima. Magdalene Oga. Trisha McFadden. Sonia DeLeon or DeLeon. Tammy Thomas. Inga Butler. Antoinette Walker. Eva Fletcher. Eves Cadet. Jocelyn Hernandez. Jamika Fogel. Eunice Fernandez. Ana Torres. Burkai Shaw. Sabib Gebregziabir. Dora Marlene Flores. Ejuvilia Gramajo. Betty Mills. Pamela Fernandez. Leslie Bonilla. And Dave Stroop. That's everyone on page 2. So let me start at the top of the page. Trish McFadden. I don't believe she's here. Kira Hernandez. A moment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chairperson Mendelson and committee members. I am Kira Fernandez, an Assistant Director on Early Childhood Educator in Blandy's Child Learning Center, a sister, a daughter, and a leader of Space in Action. I have been in education for 12 years, and my testimony today will discuss the Pay Equity Fund. As an educator, I value my relationships with the families and children who attend Blandy's. Through experience, I have realized that character matters as much as achievements. Interactions are more memorable than credentials. Being an educator aligns with me because of my character, and due to my occupation label as an assistant director, I needed help receiving the Pay Equity Fund. At first, I was denied the Pay Equity Fund due to my credentials until my education service monitor listened to my plea and understood that I'm in and out of the classroom even though as an early assistant director. When I received my Pay Equity Fund, half went to my savings insurance and the rest went to my daycare because we need help. And come the end of June until January, in between of those months, we are going to be observed by OSCE, and that will require new materials, age-appropriate materials, and building upkeep. So also, in addition to that, if funding is cut, we will be back to zero. And investing in the center from our paychecks and donations is already hard enough. I have to help the classrooms and the teachers as well, because as my role, I wear many hats. And I am pleading to the council to don't cut us off. Think of our struggles. Think of the little guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fernandez. Is Blandina Hernandez here? I don't believe so. Sharon Lemons? I believe she is not here. Victoria Franklin, I believe is not here. Tamia Asenyinga Bima, I believe is not here. Magdalene Oga. But next on the list is Patricia McFadden, but I believe that's the same as the witness I called earlier, Trish McFadden. Sonia DeLeon or DeLeon. Tammy Thomas. Inga Butler. Antoinette Walker. Eva Fletcher. Eves Cadet. Jocelyn Hernandez. I see a Jocelyn. Is that the same as Jocelyn Hernandez?
Hola.
Hello.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Jocelyn Estefanía Hernández. He sido asistente de maestra aquí en el Blandis durante un año. Seré honesta, nunca fue de mis planes ser educadora infantil. No creía que tuviera la paciencia necesaria para este trabajo, pero incluso la experiencia me ha llevado a querer ir más allá de aprender, ya que estoy en estos momentos estudiando mi educación para el asociado en la Universidad del Distrito de Colombia con la ayuda de una beca. Cuando recibí el primer pago de equidad no lo podía creer, ya que mi primera reacción fue, qué bendición, ya que yo necesitaba dinero para pagar unas deudas que yo tenía en mi país y aquí también. Obtuve mi CDA actualmente y estoy cursando en la universidad, como lo dije anteriormente. Los fondos me han ayudado mucho, igual porque soy madre soltera, tengo una niña a mi responsabilidad, no tengo ayuda de nadie y soy la que está trabajando para sacarla adelante. Creo que las bendiciones vienen y van. Si podemos seguir recibiendo este fondo, realmente me ayudaría a disminuir los costos y las cargas de ser mamá soltera. También ofrece mucho alivio mental saber que estamos recibiendo ese dinero porque puedo concentrarme en mi educación y cuidar bien a mi hija y aprovechar todas las oportunidades que pueda para avanzar en mi carrera. A través de la asistencia. Hola. A través de el pago de equidad y las becas para educadores de aprendizaje temprano, encontré nuevas oportunidades para seguir aprendiendo y creciendo en mi nueva pasión, que es el cuidado de los niños. Gracias.
Thank you. Jamika Fogel.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, council member and committee members. I am Jamaica Fogel. I am a mom of two, caregiver and leader, and I have been an educator at Blandys for 9 CA, and I'm working on my BA education. My testimony today will focus on the Pay Equity Fund. I value being an educator because I love being that trusted someone to my students. I like when my kids are excited to see me, learn, and tell me about their life at home. It makes me happy to be that safe person. The money from the Pay Equity Fund allowed me to catch up on bills and put my kids through summer camp. My children have the opportunity to take cooking classes, Spanish, soccer, gymnastics, etc. This has helped my children expand their skills and allows me to know that they are safe while I am working. It will affect me greatly if the Pay Equity Fund will be taken away and my pay never rises. The cost of living continues to rise and my pay needs to increase. If this is taken away, I can see myself going backwards. Eventually, I would have to use emergency funds to cover the pitfalls in my budget and possibly downgrade my current living situation. Being an educator is not easy. It's not babysitting. It's important and hard work. We should get paid our worth. And if there is no guarantee of a raise, how will we continue to thrive? The solution to my financial stability is to continue to receive the Pay Equity Fund. The next action step is to have every penny of the Pay Equity Fund program restored and increased rather than cut in the fiscal year of 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Eunice Fernandez, I believe, is not here. Anna Torres. I see you, your name, Ms. Torres, Anna Torres. You're up, please. But we're gonna keep going. Workai Shaw, I believe is not here. Sabib Gerbegzieber, I believe is not here. Dora Marlene Flores, I believe is not here. Edvilia Gramajo, I believe is not here. Betty Mills, I believe is not here. Pamela Fernandez, I believe is not here. Leslie Bonilla, I believe is not here. Dave Stroop, I believe is not here. That's going to conclude the witnesses for this page. I do not have any questions for you. Let me turn to colleagues. Councilmember Nadeau, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker, do you have any questions?
I'm trying to recall the young lady that was an early childhood worker. One second. Was it Kiera Hernandez? Are you on? Well, let me do this. For anybody that is an early childhood educator that is still on, can you speak to some of the valuable skills you've learned as an early educator to develop your students and how that experience plays a role in allowing you to excel in the profession? Any takers? What are some of the valuable skills as an early educator? And how is that allowing you to excel in the profession?
Okay, no problem. Hi, can you please repeat the question?
Yes. I'm sorry, what is your name?
Kira
What is your
Randy's Child Learning Center.
Number 16.
Kiera Hernandez? Okay, that was right. Can you share some of the valuable skills you've gained as an early educator to develop your students and how that experience plays a role in allowing you to excel in the profession? So what are some of the valuable skills you've learned?
I learned to be able to nurture and care for the children's need, especially when behavioral issues arise. For example, when a 1-year-old is wanting to, their communicating skills right now is biting. So through my schooling and trainings, I learned that putting the children in the corner, they don't learn anything from that. And what I learned is talking to the children's level and showing them gentle touches, reading books and showing picture books regarding no biting of their classmates and being able to talk to the children in close supervision. So what I learned is, to simply put, I learned certain skills to manage the children in terms of they don't bite each other, scratch each other. I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of your question.
No, that is helpful. And how many years have you been an early childhood educator?
Since I was 16 years old.
How many years is that?
Oh, gosh, Lord, 20 something? Can I say that?
You said 25?
I think my calculation is wrong. I don't think so, 25. I am 34 now. Can you help me calculate?
Yes, I got you. And what I'm getting at is we've heard a lot of testimony about time paid to experience versus the pay scale itself. And so do you just want to share more about that, where you land on the issue, whether or not you have concerns around whether or not your very valuable experience is being fairly compensated?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
We've heard testimony that some educators are concerned with OSSI's proposed pay scale because they don't feel as though or experience is not being compensated. And I wanted to know if you had an opinion on that.
I do. experience helps you with this job. You know, you have to be hands-on, and experience is key. So in terms of just as simple as diapering, feeding the children properly, walking with them outside, and in terms of social emotional skills, you know, I want to give you an example. When we're hiring people, oftentimes they don't have experience, and what we end up doing is we're training them, and it taking time in terms of being able for them to do their job properly. What happens also is there are people out there also, and I've worked with people they have all these credentials, but they lack the experience because all that they've done or focus on was the paperwork in terms of being hands-on with the children. I'm sorry, my mind is.
No need to apologize. You answered the question. My time is running out, but what I'm hearing you say is that you agree that experience should be rewarded and compensated.
Yes, and I'm not trying to downplay those who have credentials. I have credentials too, but what experience is on demand is what I'm trying to tell you.
Understood. Thank you. And thank you for your work in the field.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Henderson, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if Ms. Kira or Ms. Jocelyn can still see me or not, but I can just say thank you so much for all you do for my little Cameron every day. And I appreciate that you all, Ms. Kira, you've made time to allow for your employees to be able to advocate on behalf of themselves to the council as it pertains to some of these issues. So thank you so much for giving them that time.
Gotta go.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Fruman, do you have any questions? I'm going to assume not. In fact, he may have signed off. I want to thank each of the witnesses for your testimony today. We're going to turn to the next page, which is beginning with witness number 41, Claudia Schwartz. Simeon Lehman, who is Center Director at Kinder Care Learning Center. Erica Cameron, who is lead teacher at Martha's Table. Maria Cristina Encinas, who is Director of Education with the Multicultural Spanish-Speaking Providers Association. Abarash Teklamariam, Lawanda Taylor, Teresa Aspinwall, who is Director of the Multicultural Spanish-Speaking Providers Association. Cynthia Davis, who is Director of the DC Family Child Care Association. Damaris Magia. Gavin Ware, who is Managing Director of External Affairs at City Year, Washington, DC. Hortensia Yasinia Vargas. Kristen Bess. Hubertha Payne. Jeffrey Credit, who is CEO of Community Educational Research Group. Alethea Etanoff, who is Administrator at POC Learning Academy. Meseret Abibi. Christina Encinas, who is Director of Estrelitas Montessori School. Rukaya Anbar Shaheen, who is Director of Early Childhood Systems at DC Action. Travis Bally, Vanessa Lopez, and Alice Burt. A moment for people to be admitted.
I think I'm twice.
Who's that?
Cristina Encinas, Maria Cristina Encinas, I think I'm twice, so you can erase one.
Signed up twice.
Yes.
Once with the Multicultural Spanish-Speaking Providers Association and once as Director of Estrelitas Montessori School. Did
Yeah.
you sign up Did somebody sign you up?
Yeah, somebody signed me up and then we just got across, but yeah. So I am the board president of the multicultural Spanish speaking providers, but also director of a center, operations director. So you can either one.
I'm going to call you only once,
Okay, please.
but I'll be especially nice to you because you were so enthusiastic. Thank you, though. All right, is Miss Schwartz here, Claudia Schwartz?
Hello, my name is Claudia Schwartz. I'm a proud Washingtonian, born and raised in Ward 6. I've lived in Wards 1 and 5, and now I live in Ward 4. And my son attends Blendy's Child Learning Center on Caney Street. And I actually just realized I think he is a classmate of Councilmember Christina's daughter, which is, yeah, he's mentioned your daughter's name many times, my son. So my 30 or more years ago when my parents were raising me, I know in DC, I know it was extremely hard to find affordable, reliable childcare in the city. Now I think the situation has changed for the better, and I think it's made a world of difference for working parents in DC. Daycare is certainly not cheap, but the fact that there are at least some options now makes it easier for working parents. I also think it's something that attracts people to Washington, DC. But we don't want it to just be affordable for parents, because affordability doesn't matter if the teachers taking care of our kids don't get a living wage. So my family strongly supports the Birth to 3 for All DC Act, the Pay Equity Fund, and opposes any cuts or formula changes which could cut the pay of experienced teachers, some of my son's teachers I think are on the call today. We've been so lucky to have a great daycare like Blendy's Child Learning Center for our son to be cared for by all the great teachers there. Many of the teachers have been there 5 or more years, and I think retention is one of the things that makes the daycare so great. Parents with kids many years into elementary school still know all the teachers at Blendy's, and the teachers still remember the kids many years after they've left their classrooms. My hope is that all early childhood educators in DC will have a job with financial security, job security, and a feeling of how instrumental they are to children's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Simeon Lehman, I believe, is not here. Erica Cameron, I believe, is not here. Maria Christina Encinas.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I know you're here twice. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Cristina Encinas, and I'm the president of the Multicultural Spanish Speaking Provider Association. We are a grassroots organization representing now more than 800 voices through our membership, between people who own, work in licensed or in early centers. Our members are committed to work in meeting the city goal of providing the best learning environment for children 0 to 6. We're very grateful to the city government for the Early Education Equity Fund initiative to bring 0 to 3 education to a different level, not only increasing the quality of life of all early childhood educators, but by providing opportunities to go back to school, followed by the competitive salaries. The process for distributing the funds during the first round was smooth, and I can say that at least 90% or 99% of our constituency really took advantage of the pay equity funds, making a meaningful impact in their lives. Many of our educators were able to visit their families in their country of origin for the first time, pay their education, pay pending legal fees for moving forward with their legal status. And these are some of the comments that I heard through our constituency, just to mention some. However, we know that there were a few challenges that I want to mention, and this is all through my experience talking to our constituency. Some of the challenges were that the DEL program that it's managed by each of the licensing specialists was sometimes not in the same page as some of the owners, creating some of animosity between the director's employees, and it's because only teachers or assistant teachers were able to get the funds. And sometimes the quotes were the teachers were placed as an assistant, so vice versa. And, that created some confusion, but it was very minimal. Some of them were able to go and work it out. One of the challenges that we all also face was that some of our floaters that are very important, and anybody who runs a program will know how difficult it is to always keep your staff. We know when working with children, we cannot afford to have people out. And if we do have people out, we always have extra people in our centers, even ourselves often going into the classrooms to make sure they make the ratios. So floaters were not getting some of the same benefits, and that also created some animosity in between staff. Moving forward, we're looking now at the minimum salaries that were shared with us for phase 2 of distribution of the funds to the centers. And we noticed that some of the smaller centers with 30 or less students will have probably very difficulties meeting the minimum salary. So, this will put them in a financial dilemma. I'm not sure how that can be worked out. We definitely want the hard work of the teachers to be compensated, but for the smaller centers, we, need to bring that equity piece. I'm not sure. I might not be understanding how the distribution will be, but just by looking at the numbers and making numbers with some small businesses, we noticed that will create some sort of spending in their business. And last, we're concerned about, really as part of the task force, we remember talking about during phase 2, taking in consideration some of the experience, and it's something that I don't think we got to do, and that we want to see how experience can be an equity in parity with the DCPS as we recommended during the task force, and especially now that we're entering into in the phase 2. Thank you very much. I hope, we're here for answering any questions, and I hope we continue to work together. Thank you very much for all council members who have worked so hard and diligently to make this possible, because it has been a great impact to our community of early childhood education, families, and children. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have a copy of your statement, if you could provide that.
I will send it right now. I will send that right now. Sorry about that.
Abarash Teklamariam, who I believe is not here. Lawanda Taylor, I believe is not here. Teresa Aspinwall.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council. My name is Teresa Aspinwall, and I serve as the director of the Multicultural Spanish-Speaking Providers Association. MSSPA is a membership organization that serves and represents hundreds of immigrant women who are the fastest growing segment of the early childhood workforce. In addition, our members are business operators and leaders that are strengthening and establishing multilingual and culturally appropriate child development programs for DC families. My testimony today will focus on the pay equity fund process and how it's gone, and I will suggest some changes for FY24. So MSSPA has served as a key partner since the spring of 2022. We continue to work with AID-KIT, and the AID-KIT is the one that administers the funds. We provide outreach and technical assistance to hundreds of educators throughout the city. As the direct payment to educators becomes more automated, our work is focused mostly on assisting newly eligible and newly hired educators access these funds. We also help eligible educators appeal any denials to the supplemental pay. Although most educators received funds without incidents, there were many who faced delays in processing or denials. Most delays were caused by a multi-step approval process for updates to staff records made by the facility in OSSI's DELT database. These updates were usually part of a normal personnel changes or changes in staffing patterns for increased enrollment. Some examples include adding a newly hired educator, updating records for newly eligible educators, or simply uploading requested compliance information. Once the facility makes this change into the DELT system, there are at least 2 layers of review and approval. First, you must work with the licensing specialist, and then by dedicated OSSI review team. Business owners and directors continually report delays with their licensing specialists for approvals of change in DELT. These problems were amplified by documented language access problems with licensing specialists. The review and approval process for staff changes made in the OSSI DELT database will need to be more efficient as the Pay Equity Fund program continues to evolve. I would like to share some concerns. Let's see. So once again, I'm going to ask the council to restore the $4.4 million cut to the Pay Equity Fund. It's much too early to right-size this program. The salary scale has not been implemented, and the health insurance benefit is just starting to roll out. 2 concerns that I had about the pay equity process was the timeline. We heard a little bit about the timeline for the disbursements of the funds for FY24. In my testimony, I put some calculated.
You're over your time.
Calculated.
Can you briefly summarize the points on page 2?
Yep. So just the 2 things were, one's a timeline, the how the money's going to be dispersed. I actually calculated that assistant teachers would lose almost $4,000, and lead teachers might lose up to $7,000. And then the second, we've heard quite a bit about acknowledging experience. And then that's it. I wanted to say thank you very much for continually supporting this process, and more in my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have a copy of your statement, so thank you very much. Cynthia Davis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Hello, Council of the Whole, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I didn't even get a chance to write my testimony because I just said that I'll speak from the heart. You can't do anything wrong by doing that. I was just thinking, what does the pay equity means to me? Pay equity means to me is for the first time, I was able to have a salary for myself without sacrificing that salary for materials for my program. It takes a lot of funds to have a quality program. And often what happens, because we are paid less than centers in the Child Development Fund, we often have to sacrifice our salaries in order to have a quality program. So, and then also I had questioned and advocated for the fact of why we were paid so less than centers with the same labor. I was told by leaders of the OSSI team that it was no reason why we were paid less. So that's a little insulting to a profession that I love to be in, and I highly want to work and teach children. The pay equity means to me is just basically providing a quality education for children, something that I love to do. Also being able to provide extra care and funds for my aging parent. I care for my aging dad. I care for my mom just as well. I left work as a paralegal supervisor 23 years ago to care for my mom who had a stroke. So that extra money would have really came in place instead of me utilizing all my savings to make sure I can care for my parents. But instead, I still took in this profession because I love what I do and I love children. Also, I was one of the people to benefit from getting a degree and going through the program. Thank you so much, council members, for funding the University of District of Columbia Community College, so I can get 3 degrees there, and I've done it in 3 years. I finished my AA and BA and master's accelerated course, and now hopefully I can become Dr. Davis if the funds are available for me to do so. Also, what I'm really thinking of, I heard another council member ask, what have you learned in your program to help teach children? One of the things that getting my degrees have taught me is to organize my classroom in a way that produces learning and encouraging children to go to the developmental areas that they will be successful at, or even if they're not being successful at the time. It also showed me to teach children to be able to assess children individually and work with them individually while having multi ages, because family childcare, we can have a child as early as 6 weeks and a child as old as 3 years of age, depending if they're not ready for public school. So it showed me how to educate each one of those children and make them my priority to be able to assess them and be able to provide them with the education learning that they need there. Also, while providing hugs and kisses as they need sometimes because they are so young. These children have been in the world as only 6 weeks, sometimes 2 years of age, and we want them to be little adults so fast. But we also have to go back and give that nurturing moments to them because of their age. I have never been a babysitter, and neither have I been a high-priced one. I have always been underpaid, undervalued, and treated with disrespect. I don't understand how that can be, because every profession who have the degree that I have has been compensating me as a person who's been in the business for at least 20 years as if I'm an entry-level employee is really insulting to me in my profession. My other colleagues are paid according to that, so I think that we should be paid according to that too, paid according to what we're worth. I'm sorry, am I gone over yet?
Yes, you have. If you're in gallery
Oh, I'm
view, you
sorry.
should see the clock.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just done. I'm just saying that we're just hoping that OSSI can be more transparent and just work on some of their glitches so that we can implement the pay equity fund. And please do not cut the pay equity fund, because family childcare teachers will be the most that will suffer from this, because we're underpaid under the Child Development Block Grant receiving subsidy.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I don't have a copy of your statement. If you could submit that.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next witness is Damaris Maya, and I probably mispronounced that. I'm guessing that you're going to be testifying in Spanish. We have a Spanish interpreter. Am I correct? Do we have a Spanish interpreter? If we coordinate, like maybe Ms. Mahia, you read us the paragraph and then the translator translates it. If that works. But 6 minutes total. Please proceed.
Buenas tardes, presidente del Consejo Mendelssohn. Primeramente, les quiero agradecer por darnos la oportunidad de hablar con usted sobre el programa de equidad salarial para maestros de educación temprana.
Am I supposed to translate?
Mi nombre es Damari Mejía y soy dueña de Arcoiris ABCD, un programa de educación infantil basado en casa, localizado en el Ward 4. Estoy aquí para compartir mis experiencias con el programa con la meta de mejoramiento para que siga siendo beneficioso para todos los maestros de DC. Empecé mi carrera como maestra de educación temprana en el 2006, trabajando en otro hogar de desarrollo infantil. En el 2013 logré empezar mi propio programa. Desde ese tiempo he recibido mi diploma de high school y he estado estudiando inglés, y ahora estoy en el último año de la universidad para recibir mi asociado. Durante ese tiempo he aprendido muchísimo sobre el desarrollo y aprendizaje de los niños y bebés. También he notado que muchas personas que trabajan en este campo lo hacen con todo el amor y no por el dinero. Cuando recibimos los pagos del programa de equidad salarial, nos sentimos muy agradecidos que finalmente estábamos recibiendo el reconocimiento que merecemos. Vi un cambio grande en el deseo de muchas personas de seguir trabajando como maestras de educación infantil. Recibí mi pago del programa de equidad salarial justo cuando más lo necesitaba. La pandemia me dejó desequilibrada en mis finanzas, porque tuve que cerrar por unos meses sin ingreso. Cuando finalmente recibí el dinero, no estaba segura de cómo iba a pagar mi renta o de cómo iba a pagar al personal que trabajaba para mí. Ahora estoy en una posición más estable gracias a los pagos de equidad salarial. Lo que no funcionó muy bien fue con el proceso de determinación para las maestras que trabajó conmigo. Cuando OSI anunció los pagos, yo aseguré de que todo iba a estar correcto en DEL para que mis maestras no tuvieran problema al aplicar. Las maestras no fueron elegibles después de muchas horas tratando de encontrar una solución con OSI. Fui dirigida por OSI a mi inspectora de licencias, que supuestamente me podía ayudar. La inspectora me mandaba información en inglés, y aunque ella sabía que lo necesitaba en español, cuando le pedí corregir la información en DEL que estaba incorrecta, la inspectora no quería aceptar que mi empleada era elegible. para recibir los fondos y que me ayudaba a cambiar la información en Dell. Después de muchas correspondencias con OSI y iKid y una apelación, mi empleada no pudo recibir su primer pago hasta enero, mientras que la otra empleada y yo recibimos 2 pagos. Siento que no es justo por ella. No pudo recibir un pago por error de un empleado de OSI o porque OSI no entregó sus inspecciones en lo que debía hacer para recibir el pago suplementario. OSI tiene una responsabilidad bajo la ley de acceso lingüístico de otorgar documentos traducidos o interpretación, pero no fue hasta que hice una queja con la Oficina de Derechos Humanos que me dieron esos recursos. Mi segundo comentario sobre el programa es que los impuestos que tenemos que pagar, iKid envió un formulario de 1099 incorrecto y lo corrigió después de que muchas maestras ya pagaron para la presentación de sus impuestos. Cuando recibí mi 1099, mi número de empleador estaba incorrecto. Traté de hablar con iKid muchas veces para arreglar el problema, pero no he podido hasta ahora, no he podido arreglar mis taxes por ese error. Para que el programa de equidad salarial de largo plazo funcione bien, OSI tiene que dar asistencia técnica en idiomas preferidos del proveedor y del maestro. También deben aclarar errores de impuestos con más rapidez. Necesitamos más entrenamiento para saber sobre el programa y cómo calcular los pagos bajo el nuevo plan. Aunque esta nueva fase me va a ayudar mucho, todavía pienso que el dinero debe ser enviado directamente a los maestros como se ha estado haciendo hasta ahora para evitar problemas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The next witness is Gavin Ware.
Good afternoon to our city council members and fellow community members. My name is Gavin Ware, and I proudly serve as the Managing Director of External Affairs for City Year Washington, D.C. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our work, City Year is a national education-focused nonprofit believing that all students deserve thriving K-12 learning environments. We do so by leveraging the talents and passions from our AmeriCorps members, ages 18 to 25, who provide additional support in classrooms across D.C. AmeriCorps members can support everything from one-on-one small group tutoring in math and literacy, social emotional learning, as well as before school and after school enrichment programs. So they are less teachers' aides and more of a supplement to the education already taking place in the classroom. City Year has served the DC area for nearly 25 years. In partnership with our education leaders like the folks here at DCPS, City Year is excited to leverage the talent and passions of AmeriCorps members to provide additional support in classrooms across DC. The renewed investment from our partners at Serve DC allows us to recommit to another year of service in pursuit of our collective vision towards educational equity. In that same vein, we want to highlight the importance of equitable compensation for those teachers and educators that we have served and championed for these many years. City of Washington, D.C. has been known to develop a great deal of educators and school leaders now serving in the district. We highlighted the amazing partnership between City Year, DCPS, and DCPCS for many years as an opportunity for a manageable life after City Year. We regularly emphasize the benefits of serving in a classroom for a year, greatly preparing our future educators in their efforts to pour into our amazing students. An incentive of these selfless individuals to continue to serve is knowing that they can do so while living a full life outside the classroom. It is important that we recognize the need to pour into our educators in the same fashion. All educators see the potential in their students. City of Washington, D.C. is excited to support the equitable compensation in our early childhood educators, as it is another great step in the right direction in supporting our educators, which in turn positively supports our students. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. And I do have a copy of your statement. The next witness is Hortensia Yesenia Vargas.
Okay. Buenas tardes, Consejo Presidente del Comité Mendelssohn y miembros del comité. Mi nombre es Hortensia Yesenia Vargas y soy maestra de Petit Scholar con niños de 0 a 3 años en Washington, D.C., Ward 5 y miembro de Under 3. Una coalición que ha asumido el compromiso garantizar un comienzo sólido para cada bebé y niño pequeño en DC. Estoy comprometida a ayudarles a desarrollar las diferentes habilidades y que puedan tener éxito en la escuela. Mi testimonio de hoy se concentrará en el impacto que ha tenido en mi vida el Fondo de Equidad Salarial y en mi opinión sobre los cambios que habrán en el funcionamiento del fondo en el futuro. Decidí ser maestra de educación temprana por mi hijo, que hoy tiene 11 años. Cuando él tenía 18 meses, fue diagnosticado con autismo. Me recomendaron que él debería asistir a uno y eso le ayudaría a socializar con los demás niños. La decisión del Consejo de recortar 4 millones del Fondo de Equidad Salarial es un error hacer esos recortes a este fondo antes de que el programa se haya implementado por completo. Estos recortes me hacen preguntarme qué tan comprometido está el gobierno del distrito del Fondo de Equidad Salarial en el que confié para planificar mi futuro en torno al salario confiable. Nuestros salarios aumentaron a través del Fondo de Equidad Salarial para ayudarnos a cubrir gastos básicos. Este fondo me ayudó para pagar el cuidado antes y después de la escuela de mi hijo, para así poder llegar a tiempo a mi trabajo, poder pagar una certificación Montessori. Sin ese incentivo me hubiese tocado buscar un segundo trabajo, ya que nuestros sueldos como maestras de educación temprana no los alcanza para cubrir nuestros gastos. Tengo algunas preocupaciones sobre cómo se manejó la fase inicial del Fondo de Equidad Salarial, directa a los maestros, y algunas ideas como OSI debería manejar la implementación de la fase permanente que envíe esos fondos a los empleadores que optan por participar. En un grupo de discusión de educadores recientes, algunas de las preocupaciones que escuché y quería compartir con ustedes incluyen lo siguiente. ¿Qué va a pasar con muchos centros que no acepten esos fondos para las maestras? Estamos preocupados cómo se va a manejar esos fondos para los siguientes años. Recibir pagos del Fondo de Equidad Salarial en una suma complicó los gastos de impuestos. Para muchos maestros de educación temprana, incluidos mensajes confusos y contradictorios de la oficina de OSI, ID Kit, como recibir formularios de impuestos incorrectos, lo que nos obligó a los educadores a presentar declaraciones de impuestos enmendadas. Algunos educadores no recibieron pago porque cambiaron de un centro de primera infancia a otro. Otras maestras no recibieron el Fondo de Equidad Salarial porque algunos directores no subieron correctamente las credenciales de sus educadores en el sistema de información de desarrollo profesional. Es necesaria una supervisión sólida de cómo los programas de educación temprana utilizarán los fondos para garantizar que los principales beneficiarios de los complementos salariales lo reciban. Me enorgullezco de mi trabajo como educadora de la primera infancia. Espero que el Consejo de DC pueda hacer mejor para cumplir sus promesas a las educadoras de primera infancia, que se benefician del Fondo de Equidad de Pago a largo plazo y exitoso. Muchas gracias.
I'm not quite sure what's happened here. We seem to something seems to have happened. We're going to proceed to the next witness. Kristen Bess. If she's here, I don't believe she's here. I'm going to keep moving. I call a name and you haven't accepted. I'm going to keep moving. Lubertha Payne. Jeffrey Credit.
Yes, I am here.
Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members for hearing my testimony today. My name is Jeff Credit and I am the CEO of Community Education Research Group with centers in Ward 7 and 8. And instead of hearing so much from me today, I'd like to read some of the testimony that my staff members have written up for me to read for them. Okay, so one of my staff member writes about the pay equity. It helps me pay bills, helps me with self-care, getting my hair done, getting items for my business, getting Uber and Lyft. It helps me get groceries, it helps me to get household items and clothing. Another writes, the money has helped me pay bills, but I feel that it hurt in the end when we had to claim it on our taxes. And I feel that when I filed my taxes, it made it seem as if I owned my own business, because they send us the wrong paperwork. And I had to get the tax person to do it all over again, and I had to pay her again, which kind of leads into or talks to the issue that the gentleman was talking about earlier about the taxes. The equity fund helped me pay my first month and security deposit for an apartment unit for my child and I. I was able to furnish my house and make it a home. I was able to pay my $4,000 debt off that I incurred during the time I couldn't afford to pay my bills. I was able to buy a reliable car that I used the money to pay for my car and car insurance note. I started life insurance and paid a year of it off. The future money will help me maintain my bills and hopefully give me a little extra and not to stress and struggle so bad. Another one wrote, as of now, I've been in the child care field for 17 years and working in community for 11 years. I finished my associate's degree in December 2021 from the University of District of Columbia. We all know child care teachers are underpaid and do so much work, if not more, as teachers who work in DCPS and charter schools. Right about that. When child care teachers are awarded money from the Pay Equity Fund, it was a blessing. It helped cover all of us teachers from being underpaid, not feeling appreciated, but still loving what we do and doing it regardless of the money or the amount. I would like to say thank you to ASI and all those who had a part in the decision to helping to make this happen. So that's just a couple of my staff members and what they had to say about the Pay Equity Fund. But in speaking to my staff, I know that they have all benefited from it and they are all extremely grateful for it. But they are just kind of wary of ASI and how they are going to actually implement the fund. And just speaking for myself, I find it a bit disheartening that we still have to come and justify the money for our staff members, for our centers. They work so hard, they work all day, and then some of them go to school to get their AAs and their degrees to go ahead and meet ASI's recommendations. And it's time to just go ahead and do what needs to be done. Compensate our teachers fairly, compensate them to the same level as DCPS and charter school teachers and their colleagues are compensated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Credit. This hearing is not an opportunity for people to justify. It's an opportunity for us to do oversight to see where the program is doing well or can be improved. I don't have a copy of your statement if you would provide that. The next witness is Alethea Ednoff. And I believe that she is not here. Actually, I see that Kristen Bess did come in. Miss Bess, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kristen Bess. I am a early two-year-old teacher at Martha's Table, and I am an advocate for my children. My testimony will focus on how the Pay Equity Fund has impacted my life and what I think about the changes of how the fund will be operated in the future. To begin with, I have been in the field of early education for about 15 years. Being in this field is nothing short of rewarding because I get to teach the future leaders of tomorrow. However, as you all may know, early educators have been underpaid for a substantial amount of time, and we've been looked at as babysitters. In my opinion, we are more than just a group of dedicated individuals. We are nurses, therapists, and as well as life coaches, not only for the children, but for the families as well. Nevertheless, when they stated that we will get the equity fund and our pay would be made comparable to the school system, was a sigh of relief for not only myself, but my colleagues and their families as well. In addition to being a single mom of 2 boys, sometimes it's hard to work-life balance and provide self-care for myself. Not to mention, I'm also a sole provider for my mom as well and my older brother who is visually impaired. Receiving the pay equity fund has allowed me to have a cushion of support for my family in time of needs. Receiving this increased compensation fund has been one of the biggest blessings. While receiving this money, it has helped me catch up on bills, assist my mother and brother, as well as my children, and also put me in a position that I'm able to maintain a stable savings. Personally speaking, I think that the way we'll be operating in the future is a great idea, but I also think that it should be a point system. In my opinion, I think that receiving this money should be based upon the teacher's performance as well as their attendance. Receiving the money has helped many, but it's also put some early centers in a bind as far as attendance. I do think that the money should be given to the organization, but it should be continued to be distributed every 3 months to the teachers. Each organization is different on how they handle financial obligations, and so many kinks needs to be ironed out before they start the new distribution process. From my perspective, I think that this money is a great way to show that we are valued as much as the educators in the school system. I'm sure that this money has taught people how to be financially able and as well as to help others, helping their families. In conclusion, I would like to thank you all for allowing us to be viewed as the same level as other educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bess. Meseret Abibi, I believe, is not here. Ruqayya Anbar Shaheen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Ruqayya Anbar Shaheen. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Systems at DC Action, a member of Under 3 DC, and a former member of the Early Childhood Equitable Compensation Task Force. I'm also a Ward 5 resident. DC Action wants to recognize OSSE's efforts to develop and implement the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund and to respond to the needs of educators and child development facilities in the program design, in particular, the design of the equity adjustment, which is based on the percentage of facilities enrollment that participates in the subsidy program, the addition of a 15% administrative enhancement to the pay equity fund formula to ensure that programs can cover increases in payroll taxes and other expenses, the recent info sessions that OSSE did for child development facility leaders about the pay equity fund funding formula, and hopefully they will have more of those sessions because they are much needed, and the work between OSSE and the Health Benefits Exchange to ensure educators have access to affordable healthcare through the Healthcare for Childcare program. Despite progress in other areas, we were alarmed to learn that OSSE's funding formula deviates from the goals of the Birth to 3 Act, which called for early educator compensation increases that eventually took the form of the Pay Equity Fund and the funding formula recommended by OSSE. While the OSSE formula will fund programs to pay educators based on their role and credential, it fails to include public dollars to support programs to pay early educators for their experience, as is necessary for parity with DCPS teachers according to the definition in the Birth to 3 Act. Unlike the task force's recommended formula that base payments be calculated as the difference between average proposed salaries and average current salaries, OSSE's formula calculates them as the difference between minimum proposed salaries and average current salaries. Under this approach, OSSE will only pay programs just enough to meet educator salary minimums or entry-level salaries, regardless of staff years of experience. OSSE has informed programs that they may use excess funds beyond what they need to meet minimum salaries to pay staff at their discretion. However, this option is limited by funding amounts under the current formula. As a result, educators will lose between $3,900 and $6,700 on average annually compared to their DCPS peers, continuing the legacy of underpaying them relative to their peers and their value of their work. The district's move to publicly fund early educator compensation is so significant. It's the only of its kind in the country. That's why this is so concerning. I think what I will jump to is just saying failing to compensate educators is out of step with the parity mandate. It'll hurt Black and Brown women who do this work, costing them real money they're counting on. It also undermines the law's goal of building the robust workforce we need to fully implement the legislation. And the final note is There will probably be additional funds needed to actually implement the experience piece, but this year's budget cuts money from the Pay Equity Fund, which probably deepened the pressures that likely influenced OSSI's decisions about the design. So in future years, we ask that those funds are restored and additional revenue is raised for the necessary enhancements. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. And also I just want to recognize that there are a lot of teachers not here today because it is pickup time at child development centers and homes right now. So that is why we're not seeing a lot of our teachers. And not because of their lack of passion. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Travis Bally.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and for council members present today. I am actually going to be sharing the testimony on behalf of early educator Maria Romano, who is not able to be here. As previously mentioned, it is pickup time. The one bit of editorial I will share is I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that OSSI did not seek feedback from educators about the new rules of the Pay Equity Fund program or program design. I'm going to move forward and reading Ms. Maria Romano's testimony. Good evening, Chairman Mendelson. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you about the Pay Equity Fund for early education teachers. My name is Maria Romano, and I am a teacher and owner of Love of Learning, a home-based early education program located in Ward 4. I have over 25 years of experience teaching infants and toddlers in DC. Since I was a little girl, I knew that I wanted to work with children. I love this work so much. I expect to continue working with children even after I retire. I have continued to work as a teacher for so long because I am so passionate and I love what I do, but it has not always been easy. Maintaining this business requires patience and resilience because I never know if my space will stay full. That uncertainty, plus the cost of running my program, makes my job very difficult. The pay equity payment has helped us a lot to ease that uncertainty and difficulty. The funds helped me cover my basic expenses like rent and bills, and in the future, they will help me remodel my kitchen and buy a new refrigerator. But the program could use some improvements. Due to OSSI's failure to provide technical assistance in Spanish from their licensing specialists, one of my employees did not qualify for funding when she first applied. She appeared in DELT, the learning tool, in a role that did not correspond to her current role. When we tried to fix it, the inspector told us that we had to fix it without explaining how. So we called Under 3 DC to help us. My employee, Carrie, had to appeal OSSI's decision with a notarized letter stating that she worked for me. We did not get a response in over a month, so Under 3 DC and I wrote another appeal letter. In any case, we continued to have problems with the inspector who only communicated in English by email. When she tried to speak Spanish, we did not understand her. Ultimately, OSSI accepted Carrie's appeal and was able to receive the funds from her. In the end, I made a complaint against OSSI and the licensing inspector for not following the language access law. Thank you for your time, and I encourage you to read the rest of the testimony in written form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bally, and I do have your written statement, so thank you. Vanessa Lopez.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, my name is Vanessa Lopez. I'm the campaign manager for the Under 3 DC Coalition, and today I will also be reading a testimony of an early educator who cannot be present due to their work responsibility and the inaccessibility of this hearing. And the testimony reads, "Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and others present. Thank you to the University of the District of Columbia and Under 3 DC for supporting us on this path and for helping me with this great opportunity to give my testimony. My name is Mercedes Garcia, and I'm here to ask the DC Council to please consider continuing investing in the Pay Equity Fund. It raises our salaries and gives us much deserved recognition. I work as an early education professional in DC in Ward 2 at Rosemont Center with children 0 to 3. My experience has been significant. I started in 2010 and have had the pleasure of helping the little ones in their development and learning, helping them improve their skills so that while they continue to grow, they become good children and continue to integrate teaching practices that are culturally inclusive of all children. I have finished my associate's degree in early education with a lot of effort and dedication because it was not easy at all. I started looking for sponsorship to be able to pay for the university semester, books, and other materials. The Pay Equity Fund payment that I was given has helped a lot. I am very grateful because the salary of a teacher is very low. We forego many things in order to stretch our paychecks to cover all of our expenses. One area of improvement that I suggest to make is that all tax documents are handled correctly. 8Kit sent me the wrong tax documents 3 consecutive times. This was highly concerning for me and my colleagues. It led me to have to make a $2,000 tax payment. I know that paying taxes is my responsibility, but I wish the process of doing so was better organized. This caused many teachers I know to find other job alternatives where the salary is better, which I find sad. Children need empowered, responsive teachers who are capable of leaving a mark in their lives, have knowledge along with the tools to be able to help not only the children, but also their families. That is why I would like the council to continue to support teachers so that they continue to benefit from the Pay Equity Fund. The Pay Equity payment has benefited us greatly, although the $4.4 million cut that was just allowed by the council hurts our confidence in the stability of the program as it enters its second permanent phase. Today's children are the best hope for the future, and I hope to continue working with them. Thank you so much for listening and for your valuable time.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. I do not have a copy of your statement. If you could submit that, please.
Yes.
The next witness is on the witness list as Alice Burt, but the statement that we received says Alice Birch. I'm not sure she's here. Oh, that's going to complete then this panel of witnesses. I do not have questions for you, but I want to thank you for your testimony. Let me turn to colleague. Councilmember Lewis George, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I want to thank all the witnesses, especially those educators who are educating our young people and those who represented educators who couldn't be here because of the time constraints that were given here. Ms. Davis, if you're still here, Cynthia Davis, are you still here? I think I see you. Ms. Davis, I wanted to ask you if you could say more about the inequity you experienced between childcare homes and childcare centers. In your testimony, you had an experience where you all were paid less, and I just wanted to see if you can expound on what if any explanation was given for your sort of the difference in pay there. I think I see your video, but if you can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be quiet a little bit for the baby. I had it's been known for many years that family child care has been paid less than child development centers. And it's been going on for many years. Like me, I'm being a quality program equal to my counterpart. They would receive like 197 as like just giving numbers like 105. And then I will receive like $80 for the same child. Even with if I receive, like they tell us in family child care that we cannot turn away parents that have children with differing abilities.
Yeah.
But we don't have the extra staff to do that. They pay centers an extra fee to take care of children that has differing abilities, but they refuse to pay family child care for the extra money to do that, the same thing too. And when I was in one of the coalition meetings under 3DC, we had blatantly asked Sarah Mead, like, why one of the under 3DC coalition members had asked Sarah Mead, like, just basically, I just want to know why family child care is paid less than centers. And she just said, oh, it's no reason. And her and Catherine Kangera, that's very insulting to me because her and Catherine Kangera both stated it and just was like, it just was quiet in the room. They just was like, oh my God, I can't even believe that they had just admitted that. But to pay us less just because there is no reason. And if you look at the pay scales for subsidy, you can see it as it goes all the way down. I don't care if I'm high quality or not. you can see the differences between the pay scales for the equal labor. That's why the pay equity fund means so much to family childcare teachers, because that will give us a level of equity. But that should not have to go through a pay equity fund. It should have to be at the child development block grant status. And then we all move equally across the board.
Got you. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that insight. I do think it's, if there's no valid reason why they're doing it, then it's due time to change the policy. There will be, I want to ask you also, there will be soon be a roughly $10,000 difference for lead teachers at CDAs versus associates versus bachelor level credentials. I want to ask you, given the significant pay increase someone could receive by pursuing additional credentials, do you think other educators will also follow your lead in pursuing a higher degree to increase their earning potential?
I think they're already in the process of doing so. I think a lot of teachers really want to do well, but because sometimes when you have been heartbroken for so long and then underpaid for so long and then devalued so long, it's hard to bring that group back a little bit. And we're seeing it actually with staff. The fast staff don't want to go through. And then if it's already showing a pay cut, how can you really let me trust you and say that I want to stay in this profession within next year in 2025? We really like back into the panic phase of saying, I don't know if I can do it because the money may not be there because we're already experiencing cuts. That's really like a slap on the face to really start this great opportunity for all of us, and then to take back before it's even implemented, and then give us shortfalls and still treat us the way that we're being treated is just totally unfair. And I think that the city council has a great opportunity right now today to just make things right.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I know you served on the ECE, the Early Childhood Educator Compensation Task Force.
Yes.
Wanted to know, could you share your thoughts on OSSI's decision to remove considerations for experience from pay equity calculations? We've had, I've been listening to the testimony all day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, do you have any concerns about the unintended consequences of using a salary minimum versus a full step scale model?
Yes, I think it's going to become a bigger issue because some of us been in the field for 20 years. I'm not equal to my counterparts who's just entering the field, who is just an entry level teacher. The minimums are just, it's just always OSSI way of always having to implement ways and having a level of control without being transparent. OSSI has not counseled with us. We have asked to meet with them. They have not done so. So how can you constantly dictate to a field that you're not even asking questions from? You're not even seeking the advice. Half of the people that's at OSSI do not have degrees in early care, but they are providing laws regarding children that doesn't even make sense. They don't care about family child care in a way that we're advocating for hand washing. How am I going to take a child? I'm in an urban home, and you guys know how our houses are in DC. I have to go take all these children upstairs to the top floor. But they use an evaluating system called FECRS that's telling us take care of the child while they're at the table to keep the teacher safe as well as the child safe. But we've been advocating the same issue for 3 and 4 years. But because they have the lack of experience with children, they constantly putting out rules and laws and regulations based on what they want and not what we need. I should not have to complete 5 forms that has the same training because a specialist does not know what to do in her area. That's not my fault that I have to have extra work. Back office work should not be on family child care or child development centers or early care educators or businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, your feedback. It looks like my time is up. This is such an outstanding panel. I wanted to ask some more questions. But I thank you everybody for your testimony. And I will follow up. My team will follow up with questions for particular witnesses.
Anytime you have questions for me, feel free to let me know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis George. I don't believe any other council members are present at this time. I want to thank each of the witnesses in this group. Thank you for your patience and your testimony, as well as your commitment. You all are excused, and we're going to turn now to Dr. Christina Grant, who is the State Superintendent for Education. When you're ready, and good I'm going to pretend it's still afternoon.
Good afternoon / early evening, Chairman and panel and witnesses. Again, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the Committee of the Whole and staff. My name is Dr. Christina Grant, and I'm the State Superintendent of Education for the District of Columbia. I'm pleased to join you all this evening to discuss the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund administered by the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, affectionately known as OSSE. The Pay Equity Fund is a first of its kind compensation initiative to establish pay parity for early childhood educators with public school educators. With this fund, the district is raising compensation for some of our lowest paid educators, recognizing the work and value of educators caring for our youngest children and maintaining the district's role as a national leader in the provision of high quality early learning for children birth to 5. In 2022, OSSE was authorized to disperse pay equity funds in accordance with recommendations of the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force. As recommended by the task force, OSSE has partnered with an intermediary organization, AidKit, to distribute one-time pay supplements in fiscal year 2022. Through those supplemental payments, OSSE distributed more than $38 million to more than 3,200 early childhood educators, including educators working in child development centers and homes, with payments ranging from $5,000 to $14,000 based upon role and full or part-time status. Participation in the initiative was strong. OSSE reached an estimated 90% of eligible educators in FY22. This year, we distributed more than $20 million in our first 2 quarterly payments, with nearly 3,500 early childhood educators receiving the payment. The 3rd quarterly payment was distributed last week, and we look forward to updating those figures soon. Pay equity funds have also allowed for the creation of Healthcare for Childcare, our innovative partnership with the DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority, which has connected over 600 educators and their families to free or low-cost health insurance coverage, many of whom gained access to health insurance for the first time. In interviews and focus groups, parents, children, child care center directors, and home caregivers told researchers with the Urban Institute that pay supplements made teachers feel valued, professionalized the field, and had the potential to reduce staff turnover and increase child care quality in the district. In FY24, by legislative design, OSSE will stop making direct payments to educators and will distribute pay equity funds to child development facilities. In exchange, participating facilities will agree to pay their teachers and assistant teachers salaries that meet or exceed minimum salaries established by OSSE. In April, OSSE published 2 foundational documents outlining FY24 of the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund, the FY24 minimum salaries and salary schedule for early childhood educators, and a child development facility payroll funding formula, also known as the CDF. In the FY24 minimum salaries and salary schedule, OSSE established minimum salaries required of all participating facilities consistent with the updating DCPS salary scale. The minimum salary for a lead teacher with a bachelor's degree is equal to the step 1 salary for a DC public school teacher with a bachelor's degree. Salary requirements for teachers and assistant teachers with associate degrees and child development associate CDA credentials are set at percentages of that step 1 salary, consistent with the authorizing legislation. In addition to minimum salary requirements, OSSE developed the FY24 CDF payroll funding formula, which will be used to calculate payments for participating child development facilities. OSSE developed the CDF payroll funding formula based on data and information from multiple sources. This included facility-specific information and databases housed by OSSE, a survey sent to all licensed child development facilities, OSSE's 2023 child care cost modeling analysis, and input from external stakeholder engagement sessions. Consistent with the recommendations from the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force, the base of the CDF payroll funding formula is the number of eligible teachers and assistant teachers employed by a facility For each teacher and assistant teacher, OSSI will award a corresponding wage supplement based on the degree or credential the teacher holds to provide facilities the resources needed to raise wages to the required levels. OSSI included in the formula an administrative enhancement of 15% to account for payroll taxes and other increased expenses that facilities may incur as a result of participating in this program. Finally, the formula's 40% equity adjustment directs increased resources to facilities that enroll children receiving child care subsidies, driving funds to facilities serving families with low incomes. OSSI recognizes the tremendous responsibility of designing and implementing this first of its kind compensation initiative and the importance of partnering with the broader early childhood community to ensure its success. Since the release of these foundational pay equity fund documents, OSSI staff has been working to answer questions from stakeholders. We have a frequently asked question document online that we update regularly. Just last week, we held 2 information sessions attended by hundreds of child development facility directors, and we plan to host additional information sessions in the summer and the fall for directors, childcare teachers, and others in the early childhood community. We are currently addressing operations and system enhancements to allow for the CDF payroll funding formula calculations and distributions of payments to facilities. We look forward to enrolling facilities this summer and beginning the implementation of CDF payroll funding formula on time in the first quarter of FY24. With the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund, the district will be the first in the nation to create parity between early educators and licensed childcare facilities and public school teachers. Raising the wages of our early educators will support recruitment and retention of childcare staff, help child development facilities to meet their staffing needs, and increase the availability of quality childcare services for children and families in the district. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. I do have some questions. And I'm looking, so put me on a 10-minute clock. I think I'm going to start my questions based on testimony that we received.
Okay.
So it's helpful to have public testimony before we hear from government witnesses. So there were several witnesses who testified, mostly organizations. I'm looking at it and raised a point about the setting pay at the minimum. So let me see, I'm going to read from DCFPI. Deeply concerned that OSSI's funding formula deviates from the recommendations of the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force, reducing average pay by up to $6,700 for early educators. And they explain that by saying that OSSI's decision to peg the base award to minimum required salaries rather than average salaries in the new salary scale. So there were several witnesses who complained about that or criticized that. Could you respond?
Sure. So in accordance with the legislation and the legislative design, we created a funding formula to meet the minimum salary requirements, as you have just noted, and a suggested salary schedule that aligns in steps with the DCPS schedule. The task force recommendations were published before DCPS agreed to a 12% base salary increase, meaning that the task force salary expectations differed significantly from what you see reflected in our salary calculations. We did this work and released our report. And as you all are aware, DCPS signed a contract which increased their base compensation. We updated our minimum salaries to provide parity with DC public school teachers, as I said, at step 1. And though this was not called for by the task force or legislation, we did add a 15% administrative enhancement that could be used by facilities acknowledging additional expenses that may occur. So I think that's my short answer on why we went with minimum and not a graduated scale.
So what I'm hearing from you, and just as I've been thinking about it, using the minimum because, first of all, the council's legislative director allows for that, but also because DCPS, which is the, what do I want to say, the base against which we're trying to set these salaries, had increased its compensation only earlier this year.
That is correct.
But isn't a consequence this, that and I'm reading from testimony from the Multicultural Spanish-Speaking Providers Association. The current OSSI formula completely omits paying educators for their experience as an educator working with DC children. The task force recommended a salary scale which includes recognition of years of experience in addition to recognition of credentials and role. So if our base for comparison for setting the salaries is the minimum, step one, then we're overlooking experience.
And it's a cost analysis that we would be happy to do and provide council back with those figures. We stuck with the minimum salary requirement and acknowledging credentials, which is if you pull up slide 15, I'm sorry, slide 5, when we looked at how we wanted to align for the base award, we wanted to bifurcate it out based on the number of teachers that had less than a CDA, the number of teachers that had an AA, the number of teachers that had a BA, and then do the same for assistant teachers, teachers that had less than a CA, and then teachers with an AA. And this is how we derived the base award. In hearing this testimony, and if it is the pleasure of the council, we can align on what that projected amount would be if we also included an experience scale. But we would note that facilities are receiving this award. They're going to be receiving the resources. And once they meet minimum salary requirements, facilities could decide of their own discretion to compensate using additional resources to acknowledge experience. But we saw
using the additional resources, the 15% that you mentioned.
So after a facility has met the minimum salary requirements and achieved parity, if there are additional resources, the facilities have the discretion to use those resources for additional compensation needs. And so if a facility decided that they wanted to acknowledge for experience, they would be able to do so. But it is correct that experience is not controlled for in these salary models. It is work that we will continue to do as if we are directed to continue to do this work, we can provide those projections to council, but it is not the range of facilities we have, which you've heard robustly in this testimony, the types of models, who is serving, the difference between facilities that have access to subsidized funds versus those that are just full private entities. It takes us down a road that is more complex than DCPS's very, I want to say transparent, though complicated, salary scale that includes steps and lanes and experience and credentials. That's work that if we work on it over time, we can continue to build on this program. But I've kept noting that this is a first of its kind initiative, and we've achieved multiple milestones, which I also hope individuals heard the huge success in being able to even get to this point. But the outstanding question, which we've heard at length today, is this question around experience and how would we cost that out? But as you can see in our modeling, we did not cost out experience over this.
But again, what I heard you say was the salary compensation will be based on the step one of the DCPS scale, but that the facilities are also receiving a 15% and they could use some of that money. Is that correct?
And we've also included a 40% equity weight. So we step back and look at the range of our facilities that are fully subscribing to our subsidy program. They will get a 40% add-on because we are acknowledging that because they are using our subsidy program, they could potentially have additional equity needs. And so there are two multipliers in our base award. It is not just achieving base award to that first level of step salary. We are also including a 15% addition to control for payroll taxes, other expenses, and then an additional 40% weight to control for equity. And so we tried to be as, I don't want to use the word equity again, but we tried to be equitable in the distribution of these funds to control for the needs of our facilities, given the range of facilities we have in early childhood education.
Thank you for that answer. There also was testimony. I feel like this is an issue that we've been over before. But I want you to address it. I'm reading somebody else's testimony again. I think this is the Multicultural Spanish Speaking Providers Association. I would like to once again ask the council reconsider restoring the $4.4 million to the Pay Equity Fund. It's too early to right-size this program before the new salary scale is implemented and the HC4CC benefit is being rolled out.
Respond to that?
Yes, please.
Sorry. So the FY24 appropriation for the Budget Support Act for the fund is $69,508,322. We had a carryover from FY22, roughly 17 million, and that was added to our budget authority. We don't know how much our carryover will be for FY24. And so we do believe that based off this estimate, we will be in a position that allows us to have funds that are sufficient to cover the cost to implement the program. It should be noted that we have, in my testimony, we already acknowledged that we've done Q1, 2, and 3 payments of this current fiscal year. And so based on those projections, there will be limited amounts carried over from 23. But we do believe that we have the resources that we need in order to facilitate the fund with fidelity, despite cuts that we've had as an impact on this budget.
Cuts which were roughly 4 million. I think it were actually.
It was
less than that.
3.3. Roughly 3.4.
And that was for FY24.
That's correct.
I didn't understand in your testimony, just because it was a little confusing. This year we distributed more than 20 million in our first 2 quarterly payments. Is that 20 million per quarter?
So we did 10 million, a little over, I know we made a slide for it. We did a little over 10 million in Q1, and then we did an additional 10 million in Q2. So we're right at, we did 10 million, yeah, roughly the same, a little over 10 million each quarter. In Q1, we did distributions to 3,453 early childhood educators. And then in Q2, we did a distribution to 3,493 early childhood educators. And so we saw an uptick of 40 participants, but we're running at a rate of roughly 10 million a quarter.
So the third quarter was 10 million.
The second quarter, first quarter and second quarter were slightly
Yes.
over 10 million. We just did our third quarter.
Yes, and I'm
distribution.
guessing that was around 10 million.
Likely.
Okay, which would mean that you're spending about 40 million this year?
Just about. And we have to include like operational costs, et cetera. But we are on track to spending a little over 40 million. And in FY22, I want to say that that top number was 38 million. Give me one quick second.
That's what you said.
That is what I said, but I
And
want to
your
give you the
testimony-
38 million. Yeah, we were right at 38 million in FY22. And so we have increased we are up almost 300 individuals. And so that tracks that we will likely be over $40 million at the end of FY23.
But the budget for this is closer to 70 million?
That's correct, because the costs also include healthcare for childcare. That's another estimated cost that we are also including in a part of this Pay Equity Fund. It's ensuring that we have resources to give these individuals access to low cost or no cost healthcare. So this is the totality of the fund that I am naming when I name out total amount set aside for this program.
Which would also include that 40 for next year, the 40% enhancement and the 15% enhancement.
This includes the projection for the CDF, which is our new funding formula, because we'll be shifting from payments made directly to educators to shifting these payments to facilities so that the facilities will be owning the payments to the educators.
I'm over my time. I may have some additional questions. Let me turn to Councilmember Lewis George.
I think Councilmember Henderson's here. Well, at least I saw her.
You could go ahead, Councilmember Lewis George.
Oh, okay, all right. Good afternoon. I want to first thank OSSI for the work that they have done in dispersing these funds. I know this is something we talked early on when you were first starting this role, how critical important this was to get up and get going. And I appreciate the work that OSSI has done in that regard, and the work that your team has done around that. I want to start with some of the questions that came up from some of the testimony we received. So I guess, and I think the chairman's asked it, but I just want to be clear. I guess the task force recommended a formula that accounted for experience with OSSI, early educators, CDF directors, and I guess research and policy experts at the table, basically in order to meet the definition of compensation parity in the birth to 3 law. And I guess I'm just trying to understand, why did OSSI then choose an approach that does not meet that definition in law?
So we aligned with an approach that met the legislation with respect to the creation of the Pay Equity Fund, which is separate and apart than like the overall goal of achieving birth to 3. So there are 2 different sets of language that are in play here. And so the Educator Task Force did set forth and did make recommendations on how we should proceed. The thing that is worth noting is the space between us having a minimum salary scale requirement, acknowledging credentials, which I was pleased to hear the number of educators who testified about their ability to get access to credentials and how that is also changing their pathways. And most of those programs are, again, free, no cost, or low cost. But we met the minimums as described in the law. And as I framed, what we heard and what we are hearing is the request for us to go back and revisit this conversation around experience. And so I do think, and thank you for acknowledging, it is truly historic, both for this council to have framed out this fund and this legislation. And we've achieved, I'd say, part 1 and 2, setting a minimum salary and aligning it to credentials and getting it to be at step 1 of DCPS's salary scale. And 2 things occurred. DCPS's salary scale changed to the 12% in the middle of this process. And we have not done the financial modeling to map out steps and lanes. And steps and lanes don't exist in early childhood the same way they cleanly exist in DCPS's compensation model. And so we will have to step back and do that work.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I think, I guess there was 2 different, I guess you're right, there's 2 different laws or language out there. I know in the definition of compensation parity in the birth to 3 law, it's defined as, it says compensation equivalent to the average base salary and fringe benefits of an elementary school teacher employed by the District of Columbia Public Schools with the equivalent role, credentials, and experience. And so I think what people were saying is, based on the definition of compensation parity in the birth to 3 law, that should have been enough to sort of go with the formula recommended by the task force.
I understand the concern and how it was raised and framed today. And I'm just, making a commitment to say that we can go revisit and project back to the council what the dollar amounts would be to achieve that goal if we were to do average, or if we were to attempt to have these numbers scale as experience and time scales. What we know now is, as more individuals subscribe to the program, we will see, slight modifications in expenditures. But if we go down the road of acknowledging experience over time, that projected cost will be to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And so I think you have my commitment, our commitment to continue to run that cost modeling, but can acknowledge that we achieved the goal of credentials and minimum salaries, and did not achieve the goal of an average salary or experience over time. And just to note that CDFs that have resources available could choose to pay out experience over time as long as they meet the minimum salary requirements.
Got it. I appreciate that commitment in that context. You brought up credentials, so I want to ask, where are we in terms of meeting credential requirements for this coming December? Specifically, how many school year 2022 to 2023 educators still need to complete a CDA by this December?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you, one, for asking it, and two, want to report out where we stand. And I think two things are true. We really want to ensure that individuals, even serving our littlest learners, are credentialed and trained. I think you heard a lot of that in the testimony today. I can't wait for Miss Davis to become Dr. Davis, right? Like that's a game-changing reality for individuals to have access to their own professional development and learning while they're also educating our kids. The requirement for center directors to be credentialed was on December 2nd of 2022. And as we are here today, 89% of our directors currently meet the education requirement. And those that did not meet it, we allowed for them to apply for waivers that did control for years of continuous service, current enrollment in a degree program. And so at the director level, where directors had issues, we were able to provide technical support and essentially issue waivers for individuals to ensure that they could come into compliance. And so I do just want to acknowledge the great work that directors of our facilities have done and undertaken to come in compliance with law. We are seeking to apply those same requirements and provisions to our teachers and our educators, and those compliance rates come into play on December 2nd of this year. And so I do expect for you all to hear robust feedback on both sides of educators as they come into compliance with this law. I think it is critically important for us to maintain our credential requirements. We have had these credentials in place since 2016, and for a host of reasons, namely the pandemic, we have not fully enforced our educators coming into compliance. And here's what we're doing. I've heard a lot of feedback from the way that the requirements were framed. Educators have said, like, well, if I don't have 8 credits in early childhood, but I have 8 credits in education, like, how can we come into compliance by acknowledging what I do have? As you also heard individuals testify, we have a range of free service and programs that would allow individuals to get their CDAs, to get their AAs. And as you heard, many of our early childhood educators are on paths to getting BAs and master's degree for free. As we sit here today, we have roughly 1,800 educators who classify as teachers. And right now we're at a compliance rate of 39.3%. For assistant teachers, we're at 32.9%. Expanded home caregivers are at 53.3%. Home caregivers are at 72.4%, and associate home caregivers are at 50.70%. And so one, I can follow up and send those metrics directly to you all and create a cadence of reporting how these metrics improve over time. But we are working with our educators to come into compliance, and it's the right work to do. We are making historic investments in compensation. We believe that we should also make those same investments in credentialing to ensure that our little learners get access to, well compensated and highly qualified educators.
Yeah, I agree with you on that and how important that is. I want to ask you about communications because that came up a bit. I want to kind of hear how many information sessions or communications have been held or shared out with childcare providers due date to ready them for the pay equity funds, direct wage payments. And can you really talk to me about the multi-language accessibility of this outreach? What has been done to ensure Spanish and Amharic speaking providers and teachers in particular have been thoroughly prepared for forthcoming wage increases, options, or access? I hear a lot from many of our providers who are Spanish and Amharic speaking that even the language access line that is provided is not sufficient. The communication has not been adequate. And we need to do more there. So I just kind of want to hear about where are you all in information sessions, communications, and really doing some robust improvement for your multi-language accessibility of this, the multi-language accessibility of this outreach.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a fair question and fair critique as we were moving fast and furious to get the work done and out the door. And we learned in real time around making sure, particularly through the appeals process, which I heard loud and clear. Every single month, I could tell you how many folks were in appeal. And it is a longer process when we actually do have to provide translation services to help directors understand, like, we have to confirm. And I do know that folks had to get notarized documents to literally ensure that we could say, you are employed in this facility. And language was often a challenge there. Currently, we are translating all of our materials and we're utilizing our language access line to communicate with non-English speakers. And what we learned in FY22 is we need more support in the access line. And like, those are the things that we're working on continuing to improve. But we currently have all of our materials translated and we're using our access line. And we're going to keep thinking about ways that we can provide more targeted assistance and support. But I would say that when we were reporting out like our appeals numbers, which we did get all of our appeals down to like under 10, we were navigating realities of language processes. Right. And what you also heard was the cleaning up of our own data system. And so I would say year over year, the process has gotten better, but FY22 and early year implementation was challenging. And some of the biggest challenges were around communication.
If we could try to get some Spanish speaking, Amharic speaking, like staff on board to just support in that regard. Language access sometimes, can be difficult to navigate, but I hear you. And I appreciate a commitment to improving that part of the process moving forward. I know my time is over and my colleague is here ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Superintendent Grant. Sorry, I could not be there with you in person. I wanted to follow up on something that you were talking about with Councilmember Lewis George. I appreciate you sharing the information to show where we are in terms of the credential requirement. But one of the things I was thinking about earlier is that if we do not have experience as a lever in our compensation scale, what would happen to the individuals whom received a waiver from the credential requirement because of their years of experience? Where would they start or fall in terms of compensation if experience is not counted?
They would start at the step of the role that they're getting a waiver for.
Okay. But
and right now,
okay,
but right now we've only issued waivers at the director level. What I was framing out to Councilwoman Lewis George is our commitment to not outright say someone doesn't qualify, but to think about the ways that we could get them into compliance. And so for the teacher, for the CDA, for the assistant teacher, it's going to be more complicated. I just wanted to note that as we approach the deadline for the director level, we were able to bring 95% of our directors into compliance in ways that did not disrupt their ability to serve in their role. And we are thinking deeply about the way we can have that be true for our teachers. And your question is the right type of question. So like, if I get a waiver, what does that mean in terms of where I fall into the role? I don't want to testify here that everyone will get a waiver and be counted as a teacher, but it will likely be, if you're serving in a role that's under a CDA, it'll be somewhere in that level. And we need to get clear about that as we get to the December compliance date. And teachers with waivers will be compensated at the level of the credential that they hold. And so we have to work through that with them.
Okay.
But the goal
I'm
is
just
to
sort
get
of thinking
everyone.
about a situation, if somebody has been in the profession for 20, 25 years and they have a CDA, and perhaps for them, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I don't want to go get a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. You know, my understanding of the regulation that there's a process for that, but then how does that impact pay? And I think we just need to get real clear on that. And I think we have a little bit of time to do so, but I just feel like we just need to be, I don't know what.
That example, if you have a CDA, you're going to get compensated as a CDA. And then we have that experience. We have early childhood educators that have gone back to UDC, gotten associates, gotten VAs, and like their salary has scaled right on as they're getting additional credentials. But right now, we will continue to work through this process, but in your example, they would get compensated at the level of the credential that they have. When I'm talking to you about all the different ways that people can come into compliance, like right now, it's like you must have X amount of credits and X amount. And facilities have said, what if I don't have, these specific credits, but I did take these classes? Can those count in different ways? And again, I do not want to open up Pandora's box on how we will
No, I
square.
understand. Like folks would need to reach out to
And it's
do that
important
sort of one-on-one.
that we are going to meet, we're going to work with our educators. We're going to engage in this conversation. We will not unilaterally just say, you don't qualify and therefore you're out of compliance. We do want our educators to come into compliance, and we run licensure for all of our teachers.
No, I'm aware. I feel like every few months I get an email from a parent or someone who this is the first time that they're learning about this, and they think that we just voted on this yesterday. And then when I have to explain to them, no, that this has been something that has been in effect for several years now, but here are all the various resources that we offer to help folks get these additional credentials and degrees, et cetera. I do think that we're going to have to think about this as, we have more folks who move to the district who think that, oh, well, if nothing else, I can do childcare, and them having to understand that our system is a little bit different and that we have a bit more higher requirements than just, do you like children and have you taken a CPR class or whatever maybe. Let's talk a little bit about what has happened thus far with the Pay Equity Fund. So my colleagues have talked a lot about in terms of the payments pieces. I wanted to also touch on healthcare, also being chair of the health committee. 18 million was provided to Health Benefit Exchange from OSSI for the healthcare for childcare. And during oversight, HBX revealed that as of March 31st of this year, they had spent about 1.1 million of that for premiums. Do you have any updated information in terms of how this is going?
Right now, we have more than 90 employers that are participating in our program, and they've served 678 employees and their dependents. And so we are currently working with an additional 260 residents who work in this space, and we're trying to ensure that they get access. Half of our employers, like I said earlier, that were enrolled did not offer health insurance previously. And so, for us, this really is an innovative partnership. It is meeting the intents of the program. Our goal now is to make sure that more facilities and more employers are signing up for the program, because it's just critically important. And what we've heard back from employers is the ability to offer increased compensation and healthcare. For many of them, that's a first. And we want to make sure we're working to advocate and acknowledge the program so that more employers will sign up for it.
Yeah.
But I don't have the current dollar amount expenditure in front of me.
Okay, that's fine. We could definitely follow up with Ms. Kaufman on that. How many staff do you all have working on this program in general at OSSI? I'm curious.
I feel like we're all in the room. Does anyone have the quick number? It's a very small team. And I will follow up with you on the actual number of individuals working on it. But it is a small team who is managing the fund.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a small team, but I think also doing something very innovative and unique. And when I talk to folks in other jurisdictions, they're like, whoa, what's going on in DC and how are you doing this? I think California is just now starting to have conversations about increasing salaries for their childcare workers. And so when you talked a little bit about, you know, us not having a frame of reference for the experience piece, yeah, we're gonna have to be pioneers in this space. And I don't actually think that that's a bad thing for us to lead on this. But I also feel like the experience piece is so critical and so key, because I think, as someone testified earlier, right, like many of these educators have been doing this longer than some of us have been parents, right? They know how to calm a kid down, or know from just looking at something like, oh, that's, you know, that's eczema, or that's some allergic reaction, you know, try this, this, and this. And I think that that experience is valuable enough to receive compensation on. So I know you said something to the effect of, if it's the council's desire for us to like go back on this, what's the, I hate to put you on the spot, but like, what's the, what are we talking about here? What is the framework for that conversation?
So first, to answer your question, there's 16 staff members, including licensure staff, that runs the Pay Equity Fund. And so, you know, it's a small but mighty team. I think the second part of your question on what's the path here, we have given out our projections and our plans for FY24. And, you know, as of today, those resources have been voted upon. We could share our next projections, I would say, in February of 24 on our cost modeling needs for 25. And in that, we could model out what the cost drivers for experience would be. I can tell you now that it would probably increase the fund by $20 to $25 million if we were to go down that road and keep all things as they currently are. So to have the credential requirement still be where we would like it to be, to have the 15% administrative multiplier, and to have the pay equity still be at 40%, we would then be seeking to have a range of multipliers that said 0 to 5 years experience is multiplied by this much, 5 to 10 this much, 10 plus equals this much. And
are
so
you guys are you working with an economist on these models? I'm just curious, you know, how you all are going to be calculating some of this stuff out.
I mean, so to get to our current CDF, we used a multitude of sources to help us derive our current formula. If we were to add in experience, we would continue to work with outside entities to help us make those determinations. As it stands now, we think that it's the adding of the multipliers, but it's also, we are also required to meet a standard increase year over year. And the outstanding question would be, like, if DCPS signs another contract that then drives their compensation up, I think we safely want to be in a position where we're sharing out these projections in 2-year increments, but not beyond that, because the drivers for compensation change over a multitude of factors. And I haven't tapped you in yet, Hannah, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add there.
I'm over my time. I appreciate this conversation. The thing that I just want to say, right, like, I could appreciate that we're tying this to the DCPS contract, but frankly, the DCPS contract is expired in September. So long as DCPS is behind, we're always going to be behind on this conversation. And perhaps, and I know this wasn't originally contemplated in the original law, but perhaps I appreciate why people want this connected, but perhaps we need to talk about different tracks here. Because if we're waiting on a CBA that's late, everybody else is going to be late too. So, but that's something for another time. Apologies, Chairman. Thank you for the additional time.
Thank you. There'll be another round. I don't know if it'll be a full 10 minutes. I wanted to go back to Councilmember Henderson's question on the health benefits. In her question, she said there was about $18 million available for this, and that as of March, about 1.1 million had been spent. That seems like a huge spread. Now that's halfway through the year. You're trying to increase the number of individuals who take advantage of this healthcare through the health care benefit exchange. But I guess I'm not quite sure what my question is. What are you doing to try to get up to full utilization, which I'm guessing is what the 18 million was based on? And how have you been communicating this benefit to educators?
So one, we're going to continue to spread the word. It's important that it's even noted here that we do have a program that allows for employers to provide health insurance. And so the more that we can continue to amplify that and have additional intensive engagement with our individuals as we are rolling out projections for the CDF, the formula, we are also going to be sharing with facilities that sign up for the formula that they also have access to this benefit. And we can follow up with you all. We don't keep the current number of expenditure. It's at the health exchange. And so we can follow up with like how much has been spent as of June. But the work here is now to make sure that facilities understand that as they're signing up to receive this compensation benefit, they also can sign up to receive access to health insurance to ensure that we're utilizing those resources.
But so is the 18 million too much?
I would not say that. I mean, this is year one of us having access to this. And so I would be able to step back with you at the end of the fiscal year and look at total expenditure over total amount of educators and residents or family members served. So then I think it's premature to kind of right size that dollar amount until we could have multiple years of expenditures to see what that amount would be. And this is why this fund is a non-lapsing fund, because we are able to take resources that are not distributed in one year and roll them over to the next. It's why we're able to ensure that we have the resources we need for FY24. So I would say give us time to report out on year one expenditures.
So I want to ask about timeline for the FY24 funding. Whether the payments will be monthly or quarterly or whatever. There was this testimony as the direct payment to educators will sunset in about 3 months. OSSI prepares to implement the permanent compensation structure for the Pay Equity Fund. The FY24 program rollout does not provide the funds for OSSI's recommended salary schedule for early childhood educators in Q1. Is that correct?
So we're working this summer, literally, as we transition out of having our budget finalized. We will be working to share out with all of our programs the next steps. It'll happen in the month of July with respect to ensuring that they are enrolled and that they want access to these resources. Will be, and this has been ongoing since we started the fund, but working with our CIO to ensure that the licensing platform is strong, to ensure that any programs that we need to have in place are functioning. We will be working to have payroll formula calculations and generate award statements so that facilities will know the dollar amount that they're to receive. And we are on track to having that be done in the first quarter of FY24. And so
meaning that they will get payments in the first quarter.
As late as December, as early as the 1st of January. But if I mean, it's very similar to another conversation.
That didn't work. As early
So
as late
FY20
as December and as early as January. January's later than December.
Sorry. As late as January, as early as December. We are aiming to have this done in FY24 in the first quarter. That is going to require for us this summer to ensure that facilities are enrolled, that they have made us aware that they want access to this fund. We then want to project back out to them based on the model for the formula. This is how much you are expected to receive. We want to do the technical assistance with facilities to make sure that our data is correct. What you heard a lot in the testimony is we had to make sure we had the right number of teachers, the right number of assistant teachers, who was currently staffed, who may or may not have transitioned. Having that clean data allows us to make projections, and then we will work to ensure in the first quarter that we are distributing those funds. And so first quarter begins in October and ends in December, and we're working to operate within that timeline.
But that does mean that the facilities, the providers will be providing services, educators on board, compensating them at a higher level, which is what this program is all about, but not getting the payment for that higher compensation until 3 months later.
Well, the current fund is going to make distributions directly to the educators through the end of this current fiscal year.
Through September.
That is correct. We will be giving facilities projections on resources that they will receive. And that's why our aim is to get them the total amount of those resources in the first quarter.
But
So-
at the end of the quarter.
Correct. And so we are telling educators that at best, you will receive those resources at the beginning of second quarter or at whatever is possible for the facility. Like, we have to make sure we get them the resources. I don't want to advise facilities on how to distribute the funds, but our task is to make sure that they get the funds in the first quarter so that they can then distribute the compensation.
Is that what the way it will be going forward after the first quarter is always at the end of the quarter?
Unless we get access to resources before the end of a fiscal year, we have to make sure that we are able to run the projections and then go through the process of making the payment. And we can start doing that work at the start of a fiscal year. And I can't sit before you and say that we will run all of those payments in the month of March. I can say that we will work to ensure that payments are released by the end of the first quarter of FY20.
Which means that the providers will always be paying upfront the higher salaries and getting reimbursed at the end of the quarter.
Or they could choose to make a separate disbursement outside of their payroll processes. And I don't know if you want to weigh in there, Hannah. But the fund in and of itself, in our first year, we made one direct time payment. In our second year, we made 4 quarterly payments. And now we're shifting to facilities. And Hannah, I don't know if you want to weigh in there, but first tell everyone who you are.
Hi, I'm Hannah Matthews. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Research at OSSI. So just a couple of things that I would add. The quarterly payments will continue on a quarterly basis. We will have to run them in each quarter. The reason for wanting to update the payroll formula in each quarter is that the nature of the childcare sector is that there are lots of changes in staffing and enrollment over time. And so we want to make sure to make those payments reflect as accurate a picture of what's happening in the facility as possible. So we will run that every quarter. We are making clear to the facilities that they will not be held accountable for paying those minimum salaries until after receiving the first quarterly payment. So if the first quarterly payment is received in December, we will not begin monitoring for accountability with those minimum salaries until later in the year. That will give facilities time to adjust and to issue new salaries or wages to their employees once they have the funds in hand.
So I'm 21st person. I run a childcare center. I could choose on October 1st to pay the higher wages based on credentials, or I could wait until the end of the quarter when I receive the money. And in any event, you will has to ring while I'm asking questions. You will not hold the facility account. You will not hold me accountable in this example until after I receive the payment.
Right. Recognizing that some facilities will not have enough money to float that.
And that's not that much different than what's been happening, which is that the individuals received the payments, but received them quarterly.
That is correct.
Which means they didn't necessarily receive them on October 1st. They might have received them in December.
That is correct.
Give me a second here. How and when does OSSI plan to provide technical assistance to CDS to support them in completing applications?
We intend to do that the entire summer through the fall that's ongoing work that will continue as we shift the design of the program yet again to its final state. Some of what Councilmember Henderson raised is true, and that at every turn of this fund, we've learned new things and heard feedback and have pivoted. The first stage is us working with our facilities to ensure that they are enrolled and that we've given out projected award amounts that align with their data. And then as facilities move into providing compensation, I'm certain that there will be technical assistance needs at that turn. And, as we continue to make this a part of our new ecosystem for compensation for early, that will be ongoing work.
Thank you. Let me turn to colleagues. Council Member Lewis George, did you have any more questions?
No, Chairman, I think you actually covered them in your question, so I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, did you have any other questions?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We may be done with the hearing for the
Well,
moment. It
I
doesn't
do
mean-
want to thank you, Chairman, and the members of council, particularly Council Members Henderson and Lewis George. You all have worked with us hand in hand on this. It is historic. We are learning as we're going, but we're also making history. And so just thank you all for doing this work in partnership with us. And we remain open to feedback and continuing to improve.
Thank you. So I want to note again that the record for this hearing will close in 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. I want to thank all the witnesses who testified and everyone at OSSI who's working on this. Thank you, Dr. Grant. The time 6:49 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.